Europe's heart hid a rising giant. Poland emerged where East met West. Rivers and forests shaped early lives. A land destined for historic power. Slavic tribes roamed its fertile plains. Early settlers forged language and culture. Legends whispered through dense forest shadows. Identity began forming beneath ancient skies. Kings rose from humble tribal leaders. Powerful dynasties united fragmented territories swiftly. Borders shifted with diplomacy and war. Medieval castles crowned the polished landscape. Strategic crossroads made Poland invaluable and dangerous. Trade routes linked Europe to Eurasia. Invaders coveted this central fertile land. Polish resilience defied repeated foreign threats. Strong institutions anchored emerging monarchy securely. Laws codified to unify scattered lands. Churches symbolized divine support and order. Royal courts radiated power across regions. Military campaigns extended influence far outward. Knights rode with banners into unknown. Alliances shaped the balance of power. Poland's presence reshaped European geopolitics slowly. Culture flourished amid political expansion quietly. Art, literature, and architecture thrived magnificently. Scholars traveled across Europe, spreading knowledge. Universities birthed ideas that echoed centuries. Foundations laid for one of Europe's largest empires. Step into the world of lost empires. Discover Poland's courage, culture, and resilience. History lives in stories waiting to unfold. Subscribe now and witness the past awaken. From forested lands a state rose. Tribal clans slowly gathered under rulers. Power centered around emerging Piast lineage. Foundations laid for a Polish realm. Mieszko forged unity among scattered tribes. Authority replaced custom with centralized command. Borders hardened through force and negotiation. A kingdom concept entered collective memory. Early capitals symbolized permanence and ambition. Fortified settlements guarded trade and loyalty. Rulers demanded tribute, forging lasting obedience. Law began replacing vengeance and tradition. Piast rulers legitimized power through succession. Bloodline continuity stabilized fragile authority structures. Marriage alliances extended influence beyond borders. Leadership became hereditary, shaping future governance. Military retinues enforced rule across territories. Castles emerged as symbols of control. Peasant obligations supported royal households everywhere. Violence and order coexisted within consolidation. Administrative practices slowly replaced personal rule. Officials collected dues, managed lands efficiently. Written records strengthened claims and continuity. Statehood gained form beyond individual rulers. Religious endorsements reinforced dynastic authority nationwide. Church partnerships legitimized early Piast governance. Sacred rituals crowned rulers with destiny. Faith and power intertwined during formation. Economic growth followed political stabilization gradually. Markets expanded, connecting regions and peoples. Coinage facilitated taxation and royal spending. Prosperity strengthened loyalty to the crown. Territorial identity replaced loose tribal bonds. Shared symbols fostered allegiance and pride. Royal banners represented emerging Polish unity. A people began imagining common destiny. Succession crises tested Piast resilience repeatedly. Internal conflicts threatened hard-won stability often. Compromise and strength preserved the throne. Survival proved durability of early state. Regional rulers acknowledged supreme Piast authority. Vassalage networks expanded administrative reach nationwide. Hierarchy structured society under royal command. Order emerged from layered political relationships. External neighbors recognized Poland's growing power. Diplomacy complemented warfare, securing recognition abroad. Envoys carried Piast interests across Europe. A kingdom entered continental awareness firmly. Cultural norms standardized under royal patronage. Language customs evolved toward shared identity. Law codes reflected centralized intentions clearly. Governance shaped everyday medieval experiences nationwide. Generations remembered founders as nation builders. Legends formed around Piast beginnings mythically. Memory preserves struggles, triumphs, and sacrifices. Origins gained sacred historical significance later. The Piast era anchored Poland's existence. State foundations endured beyond dynastic decline. Early unity enabled future expansion centuries. A kingdom firmly stepped onto history. A pivotal choice altered Poland's destiny. Belief transformed power, culture, and identity. Christianity entered through royal decision. Faith became tool of unification. Mieszko accepted baptism with strategic vision. Religion strengthened legitimacy among European rulers. Pagan isolation faded into continental order. Poland joined the Christian world formally. Church structures reinforced royal administration nationwide. Bishops advised rulers on governance matters. Clergy recorded laws, history, and lineage. Literacy expanded through ecclesiastical influence. Christian rituals replaced ancient pagan traditions. Festivals, morals, and values shifted gradually. Sacred spaces redefined communal life patterns. Belief reshaped daily existence deeply. Conversion stabilized relations with neighboring states. Shared faith reduced external hostility significantly. Diplomacy flourished through religious commonality. Alliances formed under Christian fraternity. Architecture changed with stone churches rising. Cathedrals symbolized spiritual and royal authority. Urban centers grew around religious institutions. Sacred buildings reshaped medieval landscapes. Education advanced through monastic scholarship. Scriptoria preserved knowledge and administration records. Latin connected Poland to Europe intellectually. Learning elevated governance sophistication steadily. Law absorbed Christian moral principles gradually. Justice reflected mercy, sin, and repentance. Customary laws merged with canon influence. Ethics guided authority and punishment. Royal coronations gained divine justification publicly. Kings ruled as God's chosen guardians. Power framed as sacred responsibility. Rebellion equated with spiritual transgression. Nobility embraced Christianity to secure status. Faith legitimized land ownership and privilege. Religious patronage elevated aristocratic prestige. Class identity intertwined with belief systems. Missionary work extended influence into frontiers. Conversion followed conquest and settlement. Faith consolidated territorial expansion peacefully. Spiritual unity supported political integration. Christian symbols unified diverse regional populations. Shared worship fostered common identity. Religious calendar structured societal rhythms. Unity deepened beyond tribal origins. Conflicts emerged between old beliefs, new faith. Resistance lingered in remote regions. Gradual assimilation overcame cultural divides. Persistence ensured long-term transformation. Church wealth increased through royal grants. Land ownership expanded ecclesiastical power. Economic influence paralleled spiritual authority. Balance between crown and church evolved. Christianity anchored Poland within medieval Europe. Cultural alignment opened diplomatic pathways. Shared faith ensured lasting continental relevance. Poland's identity reshaped permanently. Baptism marked civilization's turning point. Faith redefined authority, culture, and diplomacy. Spiritual choice forged political future. Poland's medieval course was set. Ambition pushed borders beyond ancestral lands. Rulers sought security through outward movement. Expansion promised wealth, influence, and stability. Power demanded space to survive. Military campaigns targeted vulnerable neighbors strategically. Armies marched through forests, rivers, and plains. Victory reshaped maps and authority. Defeat demanded adaptation and renewed effort. Conquest integrated regions under royal control. Local elites pledged loyalty to the crown. Administrative systems absorbed conquered territories. Expansion strengthened centralized governance gradually. Dynastic marriages complemented battlefield victories. Unions forged peace without bloodshed. Royal brides connected courts across Europe. Family ties became political instruments. Alliances secured borders against hostile powers. Mutual defense replaced constant warfare pressures. Diplomacy balanced aggression with restraint. Expansion followed calculated long-term strategies. Territorial gains increased access to trade routes. Commerce flourished under safer unified control. Revenue funded armies' administration and culture. Growth reinforced further expansion ambitions. Frontier settlements extended influence eastward-westward. Colonists established towns under royal charters. Law followed settlers into new lands. Culture spread alongside political authority. Vassal states acknowledged Polish supremacy regionally. Tribute reinforced dominance without occupation. Influence expanded beyond direct rule. Soft power amplified military success. Conflicts tested limits of expansion frequently. Overreach strained resources and loyalty. Rulers learned balance between growth stability. Adaptation preserved gains from collapse. Expansion reshaped Poland's social hierarchy. New lands rewarded loyal nobles generously. Military service earned estates and titles. Nobility tied fortunes to royal success. Foreign relations shifted as power increased. Neighbors recalibrated alliances and threats. Poland entered regional power calculations. Reputation traveled faster than armies. Castles marked expansion across contested zones. Fortifications secured roads, towns, and borders. Stone walls symbolized permanence and control. Architecture followed advancing authority. Cultural exchange accompanied territorial growth. Languages, customs, and laws blended slowly. Diversity enriched the growing kingdom. Integration demanded tolerance and governance skill. Expansion fueled internal rivalries occasionally. Nobles competed for land's influence favors. Royal arbitration maintained fragile unity. Power required constant negotiation internally. By century's end, borders stabilized gradually. Expansion achieved strategic depth and prestige. Poland stood stronger within Europe. Growth defined medieval Polish trajectory. Territorial ambition shaped national destiny. Conquest and alliance worked together seamlessly. Strength emerged through sword and marriage. Expansion carved Poland's medieval identity. Power shifted from crown to local lords. Nobles gained lands in exchange for loyalty. Feudal hierarchy structured society rigidly. Obligations bound peasants to estates. Castles became centers of noble authority. Fortified manors protected lands and people. Military service secured privileges and protection. Defense justified wealth and influence. Kings granted titles, reinforcing hierarchical control. Vassals served as intermediaries for governance. Loyalty promised security and economic benefits. Feudal bonds linked crown and aristocracy. Land ownership defined wealth and status. Noble estates produced food trade and income. Agriculture sustained armies, courts, and towns. Economy depended on structured feudal management. Courts developed to settle disputes locally. Nobles judged minor offenses efficiently. Royal oversight ensured justice across territories. Feudal law balanced custom with authority. Military levies emerged from feudal obligations. Knights pledged service for land and favor. Armies combined local lords and royal retainers. Defense relied on hierarchical social contracts. Marriages among nobility consolidated wealth strategically. Alliances reinforced political influence regionally. Lineages strengthened family power and prestige. Hereditary privilege shaped society fundamentally. Chivalric culture influenced noble behavior gradually. Honor, courage, and loyalty guided elite conduct. Feast tournaments displayed status and power. Ceremony reinforced hierarchical social bonds. Nobility advised kings in councils frequently. Political decision-making relied on aristocratic input. Royal edicts often negotiated with local lords. Consensus maintained stability within feudal networks. Church lands operated similarly under feudal rules. Clergy owed allegiance to both God crown. Monasteries contributed economic and administrative functions. Religion intertwined with governance through feudalism. Peasants labored under obligations strictly enforced. Surplus production supported lords' armies and kings. Serfdom created predictable social and economic order. Loyalty exchanged for protection and stability. Feudal taxation funded royal administration efficiently. Dues levied in grain coin or service. Resource flow reinforced political and military power. Economy intertwined with social hierarchy clearly. Over time, noble privileges expanded steadily. Kings negotiated authority carefully with aristocracy. Balance of power became central governance feature. Feudalism shaped medieval Polish society permanently. Institutions evolved to manage internal conflicts. Councils, courts, and local assemblies emerged. Structured governance reduced chaos and violence. Hierarchy ensured law reached all estates. Feudalism created enduring framework for Polish kingdom. Nobility anchored social, political, and military life. Hierarchy persisted across centuries, shaping state, power, and loyalty defined medieval Poland. Poland emerged as a recognized European power. Kings gained respect from neighboring kingdoms diplomatically. Envoys traveled across courts seeking alliances. Influence extended through marriages and treaties. Trade routes connected Poland with distant regions. Merchants carried goods, culture, and news widely. Cities grew richer through international commerce. Economic strength reinforced political significance steadily. Military reputation grew across Central and Eastern Europe. Campaigns earned respect and deterred potential invaders. Strategic victories boosted royal prestige visibly. Polish armies became integral regional power players. Dynastic marriages linked Poland to European houses. Queens and princes cemented continental relationships. Bloodlines created shared interests among rulers. Political stability increased through careful alliances. Church connections reinforced international standing securely. Papal recognition legitimized kings' authority abroad. Religious influence provided diplomatic leverage consistently. Poland became part of Christian Europe firmly. Cultural exchange spread ideas, architecture, and art. Scholarship and literacy connected Polish elites internationally. Monasteries shared knowledge beyond the kingdom. Intellectual life flourished under European networks. Participation in regional councils influenced decisions abroad. Nobles attended assemblies, negotiating treaties collectively. Poland's voice mattered in broader political discourse. Diplomacy complemented military and economic power. Border disputes highlighted Poland's growing relevance. Neighbors sought compromise rather than outright conflict. Strategic geography made Poland valuable in negotiations. Influence arose from both strength and diplomacy. Urban centers hosted foreign merchants and ambassadors. Markets became hubs for exchange and news. Cities showcased Polish culture and wealth proudly. International presence boosted prestige significantly. Royal courts mirrored European traditions conspicuously. Ceremonies, etiquette, and fashion aligned with neighbors. Polish kings projected sophistication and authority. Court culture reinforced status in Europe. Military alliances extended influence east and west. Poland became indispensable in regional conflicts. Neighbors recognized Poland's capacity to intervene. Strategic importance cemented continental recognition. Legal codifications aligned with European norms. Laws reflected shared understanding of justice. Royal decrees balanced local custom and continental influence. Governance mirrored broader European medieval practices. Polish knights participated in distant campaigns occasionally. Service abroad reinforced reputation and skill. Honor and loyalty were valued internationally. Military culture intertwined with political influence. Cultural festivals attracted attention from foreign dignitaries. Art, music, and literature impressed visiting elites. Cultural diplomacy enhanced political and social standing. Poland's presence resonated beyond its borders. By the 14th century, Poland had matured. Kingdoms secured position among medieval Europe's powers. Influence grew through trade, diplomacy, and culture. Poland's legacy became integral to continental history. Statecraft blended military might and alliances carefully. Kings cultivated networks across Europe strategically. Political vision established Poland as regional leader. Power balanced with diplomacy and cultural sophistication. Polish identity merged local tradition with European engagement. Kingdom integrated fully into continental medieval society. Influence continued shaping future generations profoundly. Medieval Europe acknowledged Poland as a rising power. A historic pact reshaped Central European maps. Poland and Lithuania forged an unexpected alliance. Dynastic union promised security and mutual advantage. Rulers envisioned strength beyond isolated borders. Władysław Jagiello married Jadwiga to unite kingdoms. Marriage symbolized political and territorial consolidation. Faith intertwined with diplomacy and strategic planning. Conversion strengthened legitimacy and continental acceptance. Union ended centuries of rivalry gradually. Shared monarchy replaced fragmented authority structures. Noble factions negotiated terms carefully. Balance maintained to prevent internal discord. Borders shifted under new political arrangements. Lithuania retained autonomy but recognized overlordship. Poland expanded influence eastward securely. Union created unprecedented territorial cohesion. Military coordination improved defensive capabilities instantly. Combined armies deterred aggressive neighbors efficiently. Frontier fortifications reinforced shared control. Unity amplified strategic depth significantly. Administration required coordination across diverse lands. Royal councils included Polish-Lithuanian representatives. Decision-making blended traditions from both realms. Governance adapted to multicultural realities carefully. Economic integration followed political unification rapidly. Trade routes linked Baltic and Central Europe. Markets flourished under combined rule. Shared currency facilitated commerce across territories. Nobility adjusted to shared hierarchy gradually. Feudal obligations synchronized between kingdoms. Loyalty balanced between local lords and monarch. Unity required compromise and mutual respect. Religion played a stabilizing role consistently. Catholicism spread in Lithuania through royal influence. Church alliances reinforced political authority. Faith unified populations across the superstate. Diplomacy strengthened through joint European recognition. Ambassadors negotiated as a combined entity. Continental powers acknowledged rising Polish-Lithuanian prominence. Union shifted regional balance significantly. Military campaigns reflected joint strategic vision. Offensives coordinated across eastern and western fronts. Combined forces projected strength efficiently. Security enhanced internal and external stability. Cultural exchange began through shared court rituals. Language, customs, and administration slowly integrated. Elite interaction fostered loyalty and understanding. Identity started evolving under unified monarchy. The union of crew laid foundations. A superstate emerged beyond imagination previously. Poland and Lithuania stepped onto European stage. Political foresight reshaped centuries to come. Royal marriages strengthened bonds between dynasties. Poland and Lithuania tied their fate strategically. Queens and princes became instruments of policy. Alliances secured borders without constant warfare. Noble families gained influence through intermarriage. Loyalty intertwined with kinship and obligation. Bloodlines reinforced political authority gradually. Dynastic ties legitimized shared rule effectively. Jagiello and Jadwiga symbolized union publicly. Ceremonies displayed power culture and continuity. Crowns and crowns united to distinct nations. Marriage projected stability to European courts. Future generations inherited combined territories carefully. Heirs linked Polish-Lithuanian succession directly. Continuity avoided disputes through clear dynastic lines. Stability depended on careful marital planning. Political leverage extended through foreign marriages. Alliances reached neighboring kingdoms diplomatically. Poland and Lithuania influenced regional balance. Shared power strengthened international negotiating positions. Marriages created trust among noble factions. Courts exchanged gifts, titles, and favors. Elite cooperation reinforced unity across lands. Marriage diplomacy maintained internal cohesion effectively. Cultural integration followed matrimonial strategies steadily. Language, customs, and rituals blended over decades. Courts adapted practices from both kingdoms. Shared aristocratic norms fostered mutual identity. Military alliances cemented through family connections. Vassals pledged loyalty backed by dynastic bonds. Joint campaigns reflected combined strategic interests. Marriage underpinned both political and martial planning. Religion reinforced marital legitimacy consistently. Church-sanctioned unions strengthened authority publicly. Catholic rituals marked dynastic consolidation. Spiritual approval validated worldly ambitions clearly. Dowries and lands secured political stability. Property transfers balanced interests among nobles. Economic power supported marriage agreements faithfully. Wealth reinforced dynastic and territorial integration. Royal progeny ensured continuity of alliances. Heirs became symbols of unity and trust. Education and upbringing reflected dual traditions. Next generation embodied Polish-Lithuanian cooperation. Ceremonial pageantry showcased union's significance vividly. Processions and feasts impressed both subjects' rulers. Symbolic gestures strengthened collective identity. Marriage celebrated not just love, but strategy. Neighboring powers watched union with careful interest. Diplomatic recognition acknowledged combined influence. Marriage diplomacy shaped alliances and rivalries. Poland and Lithuania emerged stronger together strategically. Alliances became backbone of superstate governance. Kinship networks stabilized rule across vast lands. Unity depended on careful dynastic management. Marriage diplomacy ensured continuity through generations. The union of crowns transformed regional politics. To realms coordinated policy, defense, and administration. Dynastic strategy became cornerstone of power. Marriage shaped Europe's largest emerging superstate. Poland and Lithuania merged lands across vast distances. Territory stretched from Baltic Sea to Black. Borders encompassed diverse peoples, cultures, and resources. A superstate emerged unprecedented in medieval Europe. Rulers managed lands spanning forests, rivers, and plains. Governance required councils and regional administrators. Local traditions adapted under central oversight carefully. Unity depended on coordinated political structures. Population diversity challenged shared identity gradually. Poles, Lithuanians, Ruthenians, and others coexisted. Language, religion, and customs varied widely. Harmony required diplomacy, negotiation, and compromise. Economic networks integrated throughout combined territories. Trade routes connected towns, cities, and ports. Agriculture, taxation, and commerce supported royal administration. Wealth flowed across regions, consolidating power effectively. Military coordination protected sprawling borders efficiently. Combined armies responded to threats in multiple directions. Fortifications extended from western frontiers eastward. Defense relied on mobility, strategy, and cooperation. Nobility adapted to multinational hierarchy cautiously. Vassals held lands under dual allegiance. Obligations balanced local authority and crown oversight. Feudal bonds enforced order across expansive lands. Legal systems merged Polish and Lithuanian statutes. Royal decrees harmonized governance across cultures. Courts maintained justice, integrating diverse traditions. Law became tool of cohesion and control. Cultural exchange accelerated through state integration actively. Art, architecture, and literature reflected blended influences. Court life showcased combined heritage proudly. Elite interaction fostered loyalty and understanding. Diplomacy extended superstate influence continentally. Neighboring powers recognized territorial magnitude strategically. Alliances formed cautiously, respecting new boundaries. Poland-Lithuania emerged as European regional heavyweight. Religion reinforced authority across diverse populations. Catholic and Orthodox relations managed carefully. Churches mediated political disputes effectively. Faith guided rulers and legitimized policies consistently. Infrastructure developed to connect far-flung territories. Roads, bridges, and river crossings facilitated administration. Communication improved coordination of trade and armies. Logistics became vital to superstate stability. Succession planning maintained political continuity deliberately. Heirs educated to govern multiple regions. Dynastic foresight prevented fragmentation and instability. Continuity ensured survival of expansive realm. Military campaigns expanded influence further eastward. Border skirmishes tested governance and coordination. Victory strengthened authority and deterred aggression. Superstate projected power across Central and Eastern Europe. Economy thrived under centralized yet flexible administration. Cities grew as centers of wealth, culture, trade. Markets flourished, benefiting rulers and merchants. Integration enhanced prosperity and reinforced loyalty. The largest European territorial states now existed. Power reached unprecedented scale from medieval times. Poland-Lithuania dominated geopolitics strategically. Superstate reshaped Central Europe's political landscape. Governance relied on cooperation across diverse regions. Local leaders negotiated policies with central authorities. Shared councils balanced interests of multiple peoples. Coordination ensured stability across far-flung territories. Languages and customs required careful political integration. Polish-Lithuanian Ruthenian communities coexisted daily. Administrative practices blended traditions smoothly. Unity depended on cultural accommodation consistently. Nobles collaborated in regional councils regularly. Decisions reflected consensus among powerful aristocrats. Feudal obligations enforced shared governance. Mutual respect maintained fragile political equilibrium. Royal court promoted cultural exchange actively. Art, architecture, and literature blended influences. Performances and ceremonies showcased unity publicly. Culture reinforced identity and loyalty subtly. Education spread across superstate gradually. Scholars learned multiple languages and traditions. Monasteries preserved knowledge from various regions. Literacy facilitated governance and diplomacy effectively. Law harmonized diverse legal systems carefully. Polish statutes integrated Lithuanian customary practices. Courts mediated disputes across ethnic boundaries. Justice supported cohesion and authority sustainably. Military coordination reflected political collaboration efficiently. Generals consulted across regions before campaigns. Troops from multiple lands operated jointly. Defense relied on strategic cooperation consistently. Trade networks required political facilitation actively. Towns connected via markets and roads. Merchants benefited from uniform regulations. Economic integration reinforced political bonds strongly. Religious institutions mediated cultural and political matters. Churches influenced law, education, and administration. Faith bridged differences between populations. Clergy acted as stabilizers across superstate. Marriage alliances reinforced political collaboration continually. Dynastic ties extended influence across regions. Noble families mediated local and royal interests. Kinship networks strengthened unity effectively. Festivals and public ceremonies promoted shared identity. Songs, dances, and rituals blended traditions. Celebrations displayed power, harmony, and culture. Cultural diplomacy reinforced political cohesion visibly. Communication networks transmitted royal edicts widely. Messengers carried news across forests, rivers, towns. Coordination allowed rapid policy enforcement. Information flow sustained effective governance reliably. Internal conflicts were resolved through negotiation. Mediators balanced interests of opposing factions. Compromise prevented rebellion and disintegration. Conflict management maintained superstate cohesion carefully. Council meetings ensured representation across diverse lands. Decision-making reflected input from multiple provinces. Consensus maintained stability and minimized resistance. Political cooperation enabled long-term territorial integrity. Education and culture intertwined with governance deeply. Elite training fostered loyalty and understanding. Cultural knowledge facilitated administrative competence. Integration of minds strengthened political unity permanently. Poland-Lithuania became model of medieval cooperation. Shared governance managed diversity effectively. Culture and politics intertwined across vast lands. Superstate thrived on collaboration, trust, and foresight. Poland-Lithuania became a vast multinational entity. Peoples of many languages and faiths coexisted. Unity depended on diplomacy, tolerance, and law. Diversity became foundation for superstate strength. Rulers respected local customs across territories. Autonomy allowed communities to preserve identity. Governance balanced central authority with regional rights. Flexibility maintained loyalty among different populations. Nobility represented ethnic groups in royal councils. Decision-making reflected diverse perspectives carefully. Power was shared, yet firmly centralized. Consensus prevented rebellion and strengthened legitimacy. Army drew soldiers from multiple regions. Combined forces enhanced defense and deterrence. Strategic coordination protected superstate borders effectively. Unity ensured readiness for internal or external threats. Trade flourished across multicultural territories steadily. Markets connected towns, cities, and rural areas. Merchants navigated regulations across different jurisdictions. Economic cooperation reinforced political and social bonds. Religion accommodated diverse practices strategically. Catholicism predominated, but tolerated orthodoxy and pagan traditions. Churches mediated cultural understanding carefully. Faith reinforced coexistence and mutual respect. Royal courts showcased multinational traditions vividly. Language, dress, and rituals reflected blended heritage. Ceremonies celebrated unity and authority simultaneously. Culture became diplomatic and political tool. Marriage alliances continued to unify elite families. Kinship bridged political and ethnic divides. Dynastic strategy ensured continuity of governance. Family ties strengthened loyalty across the empire. Administration developed bilingual and multilingual structures. Officials adapted to cultural and linguistic diversity. Records, decrees, and correspondence reflected inclusivity. Bureaucracy managed complexity with remarkable efficiency. Education reflected multinational perspective deliberately. Schools and monasteries taught languages and customs. Elite training prepared rulers for diverse populations. Knowledge promoted understanding and effective leadership. Festivals and arts celebrated cultural variety. Music, theatre, and visual arts blended influences. Public life reinforced superstate identity gradually. Culture became glue holding empire together. Local traditions survived alongside central authority. Villages, towns, and cities maintained customs. Autonomy encouraged loyalty to crown peacefully. Diversity balanced with shared political structure. Legal system integrated multiple customary laws. Courts handled disputes considering cultural differences. Justice combined fairness with pragmatic governance. Law strengthened empire cohesion and legitimacy. Poland-Lithuania's multinational nature became defining feature. Diversity shaped diplomacy, culture, and governance uniquely. Superstate endured challenges through tolerance and strategy. Legacy influenced future empires across Europe profoundly. Unity in diversity became guiding principle. Empire thrived on compromise, collaboration, and integration. Distinct peoples contributed to shared strength. Poland-Lithuania became medieval Europe's remarkable experiment. Poland and Lithuania joined in formal union. Union of Lublin merged to powerful states. Territories stretched from Baltic Sea southward. A single political entity emerged unexpectedly. Negotiations balanced interests of both kingdoms. Nobles debated authority and territorial rights. Royal authority integrated regional autonomy carefully. Compromise ensured lasting framework for governance. Borders were redrawn to reflect shared rule. Administrative systems merged gradually across lands. Officials coordinated laws and taxation collectively. Integration required patience, skill, and foresight. Local elites retained influence in governance. Regional councils advised on administrative matters. Autonomy preserved to maintain loyalty and order. Balance between crown and provinces ensured stability. Economic resources were pooled strategically. Trade, agriculture, and taxation supported royal authority. Combined wealth funded armies, infrastructure, administration. Union strengthened both kingdoms financially and politically. Military forces were unified across the Commonwealth. Defense coordinated against external threats efficiently. Borders fortified with strategic planning. Shared responsibility ensured readiness for conflict. Diplomacy improved through consolidated influence. Neighbors acknowledged Poland-Lithuania as major power. Union shifted balance across Central and Eastern Europe. Continental recognition cemented political legitimacy effectively. Cultural integration accelerated through joint governance. Courts, rituals, and ceremonies reflected blended heritage. Language, customs, and traditions began aligning slowly. Elite interaction promoted loyalty and understanding. Religious influence stabilized a newly merged state. Catholicism led, but tolerated minority beliefs cautiously. Church mediated disputes and endorsed authority publicly. Faith maintained cohesion in the expanded Commonwealth. Education spread with centralized support gradually. Monasteries and schools promoted literacy and law knowledge. Scholars shared ideas between regions effectively. Knowledge reinforced administration across large territories. Marriage alliances continued to strengthen political bonds. Dynastic ties reinforced the unity of the Union. Noble families participated actively in governance. Kinship networks stabilized authority across vast lands. Union of Lublin became cornerstone of political life. It created largest political entity in region. Framework allowed shared decision-making and cooperation. Commonwealth emerged stronger than either predecessor alone. The Union represented balance of tradition and innovation. Local autonomy paired with centralized oversight skillfully. Poland-Lithuania entered a new era confidently. Political foresight shaped centuries of stability. Legacy of Lublin endured across generations steadily. Union demonstrated diplomacy, compromise, and vision. Single entity achieved cohesion from diversity. Foundations set for Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth's remarkable history. Poland and Lithuania were ruled by one monarch. Kings shared authority across the vast territories. Royal power balanced by parliament and nobles. Monarchy coexisted with representative governance carefully. The same became central to political decision-making. Nobles debated laws, taxes, and foreign policy. Councils ensured regional voices influenced royal action. Consensus maintained stability across the Commonwealth. Joint parliament reflected combined interests of both nations. Delegates represented diverse lands and peoples equally. Debate shaped legislation with careful negotiation. Authority emerged from aristocratic consent primarily. Same controlled finances crucial for military campaigns. Taxes, trade regulations, and crown expenditures managed. Royal requests required parliamentary approval consistently. Power balanced between king and noble assembly. Political factions competed for influence within Sejm. Clerics, magnates, and minor nobles held sway. Debate determined appointments, policy, and succession. Deliberation became hallmark of Commonwealth governance. Kings relied on same for domestic stability. Parliament legitimized decrees and enforced compliance. Authority extended through cooperative aristocratic networks. Monarchy respected collective decision-making effectively. Regional assemblies worked with central parliament routinely. Local concerns were represented at national level. Communication and coordination reinforced legitimacy efficiently. Hierarchy intertwined monarchy, nobles, and regional elites. Military matters required Seims consent frequently. War declarations and troop levies debated thoroughly. Funding distributed under parliamentary supervision. Strategy aligned with aristocratic and royal priorities. Foreign diplomacy involved both king and Seim. Treaties required parliamentary review for approval. Ambassadors represented unified Commonwealth interests abroad. Decision-making reflected balance of power internally. Seim sessions were often lengthy and ceremonial. Rituals showcased authority, legitimacy, and tradition. Debates reflected negotiation, compromise, and influence. Parliamentary culture became a defining feature of governance. Noble democracy flourished through joint representation actively. Veto power ensured all voices were considered. Consensus governed legislation and decision-making consistently. Checks balanced royal ambition with aristocratic authority. Shared monarchy stabilized succession through negotiated agreements. Dynastic candidates approved by both Polish and Lithuanian nobility. Royal authority combined with parliamentary oversight successfully. Continuity depended on aristocratic support and collaboration. Culture of deliberation strengthened political identity widely. Elite training emphasized law, rhetoric, and strategy. Education prepared nobles to participate meaningfully. Knowledge became foundation for Commonwealth's political life. The same symbolized cooperation, law, and negotiation. Parliamentary procedure became cornerstone of governance. Monarchy and aristocracy balanced authority carefully. Commonwealth thrived through shared power, consensus, and structure. The Commonwealth empowered nobles above all else. Schlochter held rights unmatched in contemporary Europe. Political equality among aristocrats defined governance. Monarchs' power constrained by noble consent strictly. Every noble could participate in assemblies. Same, regional councils, and local gatherings mattered. Debate and voting ensured aristocratic influence everywhere. Consensus determined policies and leadership decisions carefully. Liberum veto allowed single noble to block measures. Parliamentary procedure emphasized unanimity over haste. Minority voices could shape or halt legislation. Checks limited tyranny, preserving noble prerogatives effectively. Elections for the king involved all nobility. Kings chosen through assemblies across vast lands. Dynastic heritage mattered less than noble approval. Political legitimacy relied on aristocratic support consistently. Nobles managed lands autonomously within the realm. Feudal obligations connected them to central authority. Local governance empowered aristocracy while supporting monarchy. Balance maintained stability despite decentralized power structures. Military service tied nobles to Commonwealth obligations. Knights defended king and realm selectively. Privileged class retained autonomy over personal forces. Nobility exercised military influence across the superstate. Lawmaking required cooperation and persuasion among peers. Same sessions were forums of negotiation extensively. Debates balanced regional interests, family alliances, ambitions. Aristocratic culture valued eloquence, strategy, and reputation. Economic privileges reinforced political independence of nobility. Land ownership granted wealth, influence, and voting power. Taxes often negotiated, reflecting aristocratic leverage. Financial authority strengthened noble role in governance. Cultural identity centered on noble ideals consistently. Chivalric codes emphasized honor, loyalty, public duty. Courtly etiquette regulated conduct and political interaction. Social rituals reinforced aristocratic cohesion and authority. Religious freedom connected to noble prerogatives carefully. Catholic majority coexisted with Protestant, Orthodox, and Jewish minorities. Tolerance often stemmed from political pragmatism strategically. Faith and law intertwined with noble sovereignty. Elections and assemblies cultivated political education widely. Nobles learned debate, law, and negotiation skills. Preparation ensured participation in Commonwealth governance. Knowledge preserved democratic aristocratic traditions successfully. Noble democracy fostered extraordinary political accountability. Kings required negotiation, persuasion, and compromise constantly. Authority rested on aristocratic consent, not coercion. System balanced freedom with collective responsibility uniquely. Institutions encouraged civic participation within elite class. Public ceremonies, votes, and councils reinforced shared governance. Culture of debate became cornerstone of Commonwealth identity. Democracy for nobles defined political life definitively. Polish Lithuanian system contrasted sharply with European monarchies. Absolute rulers elsewhere ruled unchecked by aristocracy. Commonwealth thrived through checks, balance, and negotiation. Noble democracy created a distinctive medieval political model. Poland-Lithuania became a unique aristocratic republic. Nobles held ultimate power over king and policy. Authority rested on consent of ruling elite. Monarch operated within limits set by aristocracy. Same guided legislation, taxes, and foreign affairs. Every noble had voice in national governance. Debate and consensus defined political decision-making. Collective will constrained personal ambition effectively. Liberum veto empowered single noble to block acts. Unanimity ensured all voices were respected. Checks prevented tyranny, preserved noble privileges. Democracy existed for aristocracy, not commoners. Elections determined kings through noble assemblies. Dynastic candidates required aristocratic approval. Monarchs' legitimacy depended on consent and negotiation. Power was conditional, not absolute, in practice. Regional assemblies coordinated with central government. Local nobles advised on taxation, law, and defense. Autonomy maintained loyalty and reduced rebellion. Consensus balanced crown authority with local interests. Nobility debated policy vigorously within councils. All decisions required compromise and strategic alliances. Political culture emphasized rhetoric, persuasion, and patience. Governance relied on aristocratic skill and experience. Military command involved cooperation with noble generals. Troops drawn from estates across the Commonwealth. War required negotiation, coordination, and strategic planning. Consensus shaped deployment, logistics, and objectives consistently. Economic policies reflected aristocratic priorities carefully. Land, trade, and taxation balanced royal and noble needs. Financial oversight ensured collective control. Commonwealth thrived on cooperative resource management. Religion and law intertwined in political framework. Tolerance and legal protection required aristocratic support. Church acted as mediator between factions. Faith reinforced consensus, authority, and social order. Cultural expression reflected elite governance and values. Court rituals, literature, and art showcased noble ideals. Education prepared aristocrats for public responsibility. Knowledge reinforced participation in collective rule effectively. Internal conflicts resolved through negotiation and compromise. Councils, assemblies, and mediation maintained stability. Consensus prevented civil war and internal collapse. Aristocratic collaboration ensured continuity of government. Foreign diplomacy required unified noble voice. Envoys acted under Sejm and monarchy guidance. Alliances relied on negotiation, trust, and representation. Consensus projected Commonwealth power internationally. The aristocratic republic blended monarchy and democracy uniquely. Noble privilege ensured participation and accountability consistently. System endured for centuries despite internal tensions. Poland-Lithuania exemplified governance by consent effectively. Unity depended on shared responsibility among elites. Consensus balanced competing interests across diverse territories. Political culture valued debate, law, and prudence. The Commonwealth's aristocratic republic was extraordinary historically. Poland-Lithuania extended its borders dramatically. Territories reached from Baltic to Black Sea. Military strength and diplomacy secured new lands. Expansion strengthened influence across Central and Eastern Europe. Strategic acquisitions protected trade routes effectively. Fortresses guarded key rivers and ports. Armies patrolled frontier regions continually. Defense maintained stability over vast territories. Diplomacy complemented conquest to avoid unnecessary war. Alliances with neighbors solidified political claims. Marriage, treaties, and negotiation expanded influence. Peaceful agreements conserved resources and reduced rebellion. Vassals integrated into central authority gradually. Local elites pledged loyalty to Commonwealth. Autonomy preserved, yet taxes and levies collected. Regional cooperation reinforced overall political cohesion. Trade centers grew along newly acquired lands. Ports and markets connected inland and sea routes. Merchants facilitated commerce between distant regions. Economic growth followed territorial consolidation successfully. Military campaigns demonstrated combined Polish-Lithuanian strength. Armies included diverse ethnic and regional contingents. Coordination enhanced response to external threats. Territorial gains reflected strategic planning and execution. Castles, forts, and towns symbolized expansion visibly. Architecture projected power and security. Settlements encouraged migration, commerce, and loyalty. Infrastructure supported both defense and administration efficiently. Nobility governed frontier territories with delegated authority. Feudal hierarchy ensured control over scattered regions. Military obligations tied lords to Commonwealth. Expansion strengthened bonds between crown and aristocracy. Religious institutions accompanied territorial growth steadily. Churches established in new regions reinforced authority. Faith provided social cohesion across diverse populations. Clergy mediated disputes and legitimized rule locally. Population diversity increased, requiring cultural diplomacy. Poles, Lithuanians, Ruthenians, Tatars coexisted. Shared governance maintained harmony across multi-ethnic lands. Unity relied on negotiation, tolerance, and administration. Royal decrees codified rights and responsibilities regionally. Law extended across new territories gradually. Justice ensured nobles, peasants, and towns obeyed. Consistency reinforced legitimacy of expanded realm. Economic exploitation of fertile lands supported state stability. Grain, timber, and other resources funded royal coffers. Surplus production strengthened trade and military capacity. Wealth reinforced influence within Europe and beyond. Neighboring powers recognized the Commonwealth's growing reach. Territorial scale created diplomatic leverage regionally. Envoys acknowledged Poland-Lithuania as formidable partner. Borders defined power, influence, and continental standing. The Golden Age combined ambition, strategy, and culture. Expansion reflected vision, planning, and execution. Poland-Lithuania became a superpower of 16th century Europe. Control from Baltic to Black Sea symbolized success. Fertile soils fueled economic growth immensely. Fields produced grain, livestock, and essential crops. Harvests fed population and supported expanding cities. Agriculture became backbone of Polish-Lithuanian wealth. Grain exports connected Commonwealth to Western Europe. Dansk ports shipped cereals to distant markets. Merchants profited, while state collected levies reliably. Trade strengthened economy and international influence simultaneously. Nobles controlled vast estates, producing surplus efficiently. Peasants labored under obligations and tenure agreements. Feudal structures ensured consistent output and order. Productivity fueled aristocratic lifestyle and royal coffers. River networks facilitated transport of goods strategically. Caravans carried grain, timber, and other resources. Logistics connected hinterlands to urban centers efficiently. Infrastructure improvement supported economic expansion effectively. Urban centers thrived on commerce and storage. Warehouses, mills, and markets multiplied in towns. Merchants coordinated supply with demand across Europe. Trade promoted cultural and technological exchange steadily. Royal taxation regulated and profited from agriculture. Levies funded armies, administration, and infrastructure. Economic growth underpinned political and military power. Agriculture became central to Commonwealth's strength. Crafts and guilds complemented agricultural prosperity locally. Milling, baking, and brewing industries developed gradually. Urban labor supported rural production indirectly. Economy interconnected countryside with cities effectively. Population growth followed economic expansion consistently. Abundant food reduced famine, strengthened resilience. Migration increased workforce for estates and towns. Prosperity attracted settlers to frontier and city regions. Wealth accumulation financed culture, arts, and education. Patrons supported painters, architects, and scholars generously. Artistic development flourished alongside economic success. Cities became centers of culture and refinement. Trade networks linked Poland-Lithuania to Venice, Flanders. Exports fostered international partnerships and diplomatic leverage. Economic strength translated into continental prestige. Wealth facilitated alliances and maintained military readiness. Royal and noble estates reinvested in land improvements. Irrigation, ploughing, and storage increased efficiency. Agriculture adapted to technological and organizational advancements. Innovation enhanced productivity and reinforced prosperity sustainably. Agricultural surplus funded military campaigns efficiently. Armies could operate longer without draining local resources. Frontier expansion supported by food security effectively. Grain exports contributed to both wealth and defense. Economic prosperity reinforced social and political stability. Wealth distributed between nobles, merchants, and crown. Commonwealth thrived through production, trade, and organization. Agriculture became pillar of 16th century golden age. Farming success connected economy, society, and governance. Poland-Lithuania's prosperity became model of medieval efficiency. Grain exports symbolized both power and influence. Agriculture underpinned wealth, diplomacy, and cultural growth. Renaissance ideas reached Polish Lithuanian lands rapidly. Scholars embraced philosophy, astronomy, and natural sciences. Universities promoted research and intellectual curiosity actively. Knowledge became valued alongside political and economic power. Printing presses spread books across cities and towns. Literature, science, and theology reached wider audiences. Learning connected the Commonwealth to European thought. Education advanced culture and societal sophistication steadily. Architecture reflected Renaissance influence visibly and elegantly. Palaces, churches, and civic buildings displayed grandeur. Artistic patronage showcased wealth, prestige, and taste. Cultural expression became hallmark of noble identity. Mathematics and astronomy developed under royal sponsorship. Scholars studied celestial bodies and calendar systems. Observation and experimentation advanced scientific understanding. Innovation complemented intellectual curiosity. Throughout the era, poetry and literature flourished across Polish and Lithuanian languages. Writers explored history, humanism, and moral philosophy. Courtly literature reflected aristocratic ideals and education. Books promoted identity and cultural cohesion effectively. Music thrived in courts and churches actively. Composers created sacred and secular compositions widely. Performances elevated ceremonies, rituals, and public gatherings. Art strengthened political legitimacy and cultural reputation. Royal and noble patronage funded scholarly endeavors. Libraries preserved manuscripts and facilitated study. Intellectual life attracted students from across Europe. Centers of learning became hubs of knowledge exchange. Medicine and anatomy advanced gradually under scholarly attention. Hospitals and universities encouraged research and experimentation. Scientific curiosity complemented practical governance and well-being. Healthcare knowledge improved through observation and study systematically. Cartography and geography developed under state and noble support. Maps documented territories, trade routes, and political boundaries. Exploration knowledge enhanced diplomacy, trade, and defense. Science reinforced political and cultural influence efficiently. Education became essential for noble children systematically. Curricula included languages, history, rhetoric, and science. Preparation ensured competence in administration, diplomacy, and culture. Learning maintained social hierarchy while fostering intellectual growth. Artists blended native and imported styles skillfully. Sculpture, painting, and architecture displayed cosmopolitan taste. Innovation balanced tradition with Renaissance techniques creatively. Cultural production reflected power, sophistication, and identity. Scientific societies formed to discuss and disseminate ideas. Collaboration among scholars encouraged experimentation and debate. Knowledge traveled through letters, books, and meetings. Ideas spread across regions, reinforcing shared culture. Printing, education, and art elevated the Commonwealth's prestige. Culture and science symbolized political power and refinement. Intellectual life became central to Golden Age identity. Poland-Lithuania shone as beacon of learning and culture. Patrons invested in arts and education generously. Universities, schools, and academies flourished under sponsorship. Knowledge, art, and science shaped society deeply. The Golden Age reflected prosperity, intellect, and refinement. Krakow became heart of learning in Poland. Jagiellonian University led scholars across Europe. Students studied law, medicine, and philosophy. Knowledge spread from classrooms to broader society. Vilnius University attracted minds from Lithuania and beyond. Curriculum included science, humanities, and theology. Intellectual exchange fostered innovation and debate. Universities became hubs of cultural and political thought. Faculty promoted Renaissance ideals with vigor. Astronomy, mathematics, and natural sciences advanced. Scholars observed stars, planets, and natural phenomena. Research connected Poland-Lithuania to European discoveries. Libraries grew with manuscripts and printed books. Rare texts preserved knowledge for future generations. Students accessed classical and contemporary works. Education became foundation for governance and diplomacy. Academics collaborated across borders consistently. Ideas traveled from Italy, Germany, and France. Translation and study enriched local intellectual life. Cross-cultural scholarship reinforced Commonwealth's prestige. Medicine and anatomy advanced in university settings. Hospitals affiliated with schools improved practical skills. Observation and experimentation enhanced healthcare knowledge. Scientific inquiry became institutionalized within learning centers. Law and political theory guided noble governance. Education prepared aristocrats for civic responsibilities. Understanding law reinforced political stability. Universities trained competent leaders for Commonwealth administration. Theology remained central to intellectual life. Debates balanced faith with humanist philosophy. Clergy and scholars collaborated in research. Religion guided moral and political education simultaneously. Arts and literature thrived alongside academics. Poetry, drama, and music enriched campus life. Universities hosted public lectures and performances. Culture and learning intertwined across educational centers. Student life encouraged debate, rhetoric, and discourse. Young nobles and scholars engaged in political discussion. Ideas shaped policy, culture, and diplomacy actively. Learning cultivated informed aristocracy capable of leadership. Printing presses amplified university knowledge rapidly. Books, pamphlets, and journals circulated widely. Ideas reached distant towns, courts, and markets. Education extended influence beyond classroom walls effectively. Centers of learning fostered innovation in navigation. Cartography and exploration benefited from scholarly study. Scientific and geographic knowledge supported statecraft. Universities bridged intellectual pursuit with practical governance. Intellectual networks connected Commonwealth scholars internationally. Letters, lectures, and collaborations facilitated exchange. Poland-Lithuania became recognized for academic excellence. Ideas influenced Europe politically, culturally, and scientifically. Noble patronage ensured universities remained well supported. Endowments funded research, infrastructure, and faculty. Wealth reinforced the capacity for cultural and intellectual growth. Education became a defining feature of Golden Age society. Poland-Lithuania gained prestige across the continent. Kings and nobles were recognized by European courts. Diplomacy reflected both power and refinement consistently. The Commonwealth became model of governance and influence. Cultural achievements impressed visitors from distant lands. Art, architecture, and music reflected sophistication. Universities and intellectual centers attracted scholars internationally. Education showcased Poland's commitment to learning and progress. Royal courts hosted elaborate ceremonies and festivities. Noble patronage elevated literature, theater, and music. Artists thrived under state and aristocratic support. Culture became instrument of prestige and diplomacy. Military strength reinforced political credibility abroad. Combined armies projected power to neighboring states. Frontier security reflected strategic planning and leadership. Poland-Lithuania commanded respect through force and negotiation. Trade links connected Baltic, Black Sea, and Western Europe. Exports of grain and goods boosted wealth and influence. Economic prosperity allowed patronage of arts and learning. Commerce enhanced Poland's role in continental politics. Ambassadors traveled across Europe representing the Commonwealth. Diplomatic skill reflected political sophistication and foresight. Alliances were forged with France, Hungary, and others. Poland's voice influenced decisions far beyond its borders. Printing presses circulated Polish works widely. Books on law, philosophy, and science reached Europe. Scholars corresponded with colleagues in Italy and Germany. Knowledge exchange reinforced political and cultural leadership. Religious tolerance attracted thinkers, merchants, and settlers. Poland-Lithuania became haven for diverse populations. Pragmatic policy enhanced internal stability and international image. Tolerance elevated reputation among European monarchs and envoys. Noble assemblies and Sejm showcased political innovation. Shared governance inspired observers from neighboring nations. Republican institutions reflected balance of monarchy and aristocracy. Political culture became model of enlightened governance. Festivals, tournaments, and public events projected unity. Ceremonies emphasized power, culture, and civic identity. Visual grandeur symbolized strength of state and society. Pageantry enhanced prestige, both domestically and abroad. Architecture blended Gothic, Renaissance, and local styles. Palaces, churches, and civic buildings reflected sophistication. Urban development displayed wealth, culture, and influence. Cities became centers of art, learning, and diplomacy. Science and exploration advanced under Commonwealth patronage. Astronomy, medicine, and cartography flourished with support. Innovation reinforced political and cultural authority. Knowledge positioned Poland-Lithuania as European intellectual leader. Education of nobility ensured competent political leadership. Universities trained administrators, diplomats, and military officers. Learned aristocracy strengthened state cohesion and governance. Scholarship reinforced Commonwealth's reputation internationally. Military, diplomacy, culture, and economy worked together. Poland-Lithuania exercised soft and hard power effectively. Golden Age reflected balance between intellect and strength. The Commonwealth became a beacon of European leadership. Polish literature, music, and art influenced neighboring regions. Cultural exports enhanced political prestige and recognition. Ideas traveled through courts, universities, and trade. Poland shaped European culture and policy decisively. By mid-16th century, the Commonwealth led continentally. Territorial, cultural, and political power combined uniquely. Poland became exemplar of governance, learning, and diplomacy. Golden Age solidified enduring European influence and legacy. Polish winged hussars became symbols of power. Elite cavalry struck fear into all enemies. Heavily armored, highly disciplined, and swift. Battlefields trembled under their thunderous charge. Wings attached to armor created psychological impact. Enemies often panicked before actual combat began. Horsemen combined speed, precision, and shock tactics. Their reputation spread across Europe and beyond. Lances, sabers, and pistols equipped each warrior. Training focused on horsemanship and coordinated maneuvers. Tactics emphasized mobility, timing, and discipline. Unit cohesion maximized devastating battlefield effectiveness. Hussars led major charges decisively in wars. Cavalry broke enemy lines repeatedly with force. Their audacity turned tides of crucial battles. Strategy relied on speed, coordination, and morale. Armor combined protection with agility gracefully. Helmets, breastplates, and wings offered defense. Mounted units balanced defense with survivability carefully. Design reflected centuries of martial experience. Hussars maintained elite status through noble selection. Only wealthier, skilled warriors joined the ranks. Social prestige reinforced dedication and training. Cavalry became central to Commonwealth military doctrine. Mounted archery complemented traditional shock tactics occasionally. Flexibility allowed adaptation to different enemy formations. Combined arms improved overall battlefield outcomes. Hussars remained unmatched in speed and impact. Charging in wedge formations maximized penetration power. Discipline ensured lines held under pressure effectively. Surprise and timing amplified their tactical advantage. Enemy cohesion often collapsed under psychological and physical assault. Winged hussars were celebrated in art and chronicles. Paintings and poetry immortalized their victories. Cultural symbolism reinforced national pride and identity. Hussars embodied courage, honor, and martial excellence. Participation required rigorous training and loyalty. Cavalrymen drilled daily with weapons and horses. Skill and endurance ensured effectiveness in prolonged campaigns. Experience honed instincts and battlefield intuition consistently. Tactics evolved over decades of conflict strategically. Lessons from Hungary, Russia, and Ottoman campaigns applied. Flexibility allowed hussars to confront different threats successfully. Innovation ensured superiority over traditional infantry and cavalry. Royal and noble patronage maintained hussar units. Funding, horses, and equipment secured elite status. Political will ensured battlefield readiness consistently. Support reflected their strategic and symbolic importance. Winged hussars inspired both fear and admiration. Enemy soldiers respected their prowess and commitment. Legends grew as victories spread across Europe. Polish cavalry became a defining feature of Commonwealth armies. By the 17th century, hussars dominated Eastern Europe. Elite cavalry influenced military tactics continentally. Their charge became a defining moment of engagements. Polish military reputation rested heavily on these warriors. Polish armies achieved remarkable victories repeatedly. Enemies included Ottomans, Russians, and Swedes alike. Tactics, discipline, and courage defined their success. Battlefields witnessed skill, strategy, and determination. The Battle of Vienna highlighted Commonwealth valor. Winged hussars broke Ottoman lines decisively. Christian Europe owed defense to Polish bravery. Coordination and timing ensured historic triumph. Wars with Russia tested Eastern defenses severely. Field campaigns relied on mobility and supply. Hussars, infantry, and artillery coordinated effectively. Victory secured borders and political influence successfully. Wars with Russia tested Eastern defenses severely. Field campaigns relied on mobility and supply. Hussars, infantry, and artillery coordinated effectively. Victory secured borders and political influence successfully. Swedish invasions challenged the Commonwealth northward. Wars of the Deluge tested resilience dramatically. Combined forces repelled invaders through strategy, unity of army, and nobility ensured survival. Sieges demonstrated mastery of engineering and tactics. Fortresses, walls, and artillery repelled assaults. Defense relied on discipline, coordination, and ingenuity. Persistence and strategy turned disadvantage into advantage. Naval engagements complemented land campaigns cautiously. Vessels transported troops and supplies efficiently. Control of rivers and ports secured logistics. Waterways enabled rapid response to multiple threats. Tactical flexibility allowed adaptation to enemy maneuvers. Combined arms approach balanced cavalry, infantry, artillery. Commanders anticipated movements and exploited weaknesses. Polish armies demonstrated operational and strategic foresight. Alliances enhanced victories against foreign powers strategically. Neighboring states provided support or neutrality tactically. Diplomacy complemented battlefield achievements effectively. Coalition management maximized Commonwealth military advantage. Supply chains sustained long campaigns successfully. Food, weapons, and horses reached front lines efficiently. Logistics ensured readiness for prolonged engagements. Planning reinforced operational capacity and morale. Noble-led forces demonstrated initiative and leadership actively. Field marshals coordinated diverse contingents carefully. Experience of commanders influenced success repeatedly. Training and discipline produced highly effective units. Victories were celebrated across towns and courts. Triumphant armies returned with honors and prestige. Public ceremonies reinforced morale and national identity. Military glory became cornerstone of cultural pride. Chroniclers and poets immortalized battlefield achievements. Stories of valor inspired future generations consistently. Heroic acts reinforced reputation across Europe widely. Military success enhanced Poland-Lithuania's international standing. Battles shaped political outcomes beyond borders significantly. Negotiations often favored victors diplomatically and economically. Territorial gains reflected strategic foresight and persistence. Victory reinforced Commonwealth influence regionally and continentally. Military campaigns demonstrated synergy of strategy and bravery. Cavalry, infantry, artillery, and logistics integrated seamlessly. Coordination ensured superiority against numerically equal or greater forces. Polish victories became defining moments of 16th–17th centuries. Legacy of these victories shaped national identity profoundly. Heroes and battles became symbols of courage and honor. Commonwealth's reputation as Europe's defender endured historically. Military prowess defined Poland-Lithuania's golden age stature. Polish-Lithuanian forces defended Europe courageously. Ottoman expansion threatened central and eastern lands. Commonwealth armies acted as shield of Christendom. Victory preserved culture, religion, and political stability. The Battle of Vienna marked a historic turning point. Winged hussars led decisive charges fearlessly. Ottoman siege collapsed under Polish determination. Christian Europe celebrated relief and military skill. Allied coordination amplified defensive effectiveness significantly. Holy Roman Empire and Polish forces collaborated strategically. Supply lines and intelligence ensured readiness effectively. Communication allowed rapid response to Ottoman movements. Sieges tested fortitude, strategy, and logistics. Defenders held walls under intense pressure. Artillery and infantry complemented cavalry charges. Persistence and planning forced enemy retreat consistently. Commanders balanced offensive and defensive operations. Tactical innovation maximized available resources. Ambushes, flanking, and surprise attacks succeeded repeatedly. Strategy relied on intelligence, terrain, and timing. Religious motivation inspired soldiers and commanders alike. Defense framed as protection of faith and civilization. Clergy encouraged valor, prayer, and moral resolve. Spiritual support strengthened commitment on battlefield. European allies recognized Poland-Lithuania's strategic importance. Envoys acknowledged military contribution diplomatically. Reputation as defender enhanced political leverage. Military prestige translated into influence abroad consistently. Troop training emphasized discipline, endurance, and cohesion. Cavalry and infantry operated in coordinated formations. Artillery placement maximized defensive effectiveness. Professionalism distinguished Commonwealth armies from any adversaries. Noble-led forces balanced aristocratic initiative with royal command. Field marshals coordinated diverse contingents skillfully. Experience allowed rapid adaptation to changing battlefield conditions. Leadership was decisive in moments of crisis repeatedly. Logistics ensured sustained defense during prolonged sieges. Food, ammunition, and reinforcements reached front lines. Coordination with local authorities supported supply chains. Preparation prevented collapse under prolonged Ottoman pressure. Victory inspired morale across Europe widely. Christendom viewed Poland-Lithuania as critical bulwark. Success strengthened national pride and military tradition. Heroism and sacrifice were immortalized in chronicles and art. Battles reshaped regional power balances significantly. Ottoman ambitions were halted temporarily by Commonwealth intervention. Political negotiation reflected military leverage consistently. Defense secured borders, influence, and continental recognition. Legacy of defense cemented Poland-Lithuania's historical reputation. Christian Europe relied on Commonwealth's military and diplomacy. National identity intertwined with valor and sacrifice. Military tradition became central to cultural memory. Polish-Lithuanian role in Ottoman wars defined strategic importance. Unity, courage, and tactical skill protected European civilization. Wars reinforced reputation as defender of faith and lands. Commonwealth's golden age glory was inseparable from military prowess. Commonwealth armies were commanded by noble aristocracy. Magnates and Schlochter led regiments with authority. Military service was both duty and prestige. Cavalry formed the backbone of every campaign. Armies combined heavy cavalry, infantry, and artillery. Cavalry traditions emphasized speed, shock, and maneuver. Knights trained from youth in horsemanship rigorously. Discipline ensured battlefield cohesion and effectiveness consistently. Noble-led units brought personal retinues to war. Each magnate supplied soldiers, horses, and equipment. Private forces supplemented royal levy significantly. Collaboration strengthened overall military capability effectively. Cavalry units maintained high mobility across terrain. Hussars, panzerni, and light cavalry complemented strategy. Rapid movement allowed flanking, ambush, and pursuit. Flexibility enabled response to diverse enemy formations. Feudal obligations ensured loyalty to monarch and commonwealth. Nobles provided troops in exchange for privileges. Service was both social expectation and political leverage. Military hierarchy balanced personal command with royal oversight. Armies trained in combined arms tactics strategically. Cavalry charges coordinated with infantry advances and artillery. Discipline maximized impact during sieges and open battles. Commanders adapted formations according to terrain and threat. Siege warfare relied on both noble leadership and engineering. Artillery units placed under coordinated supervision effectively. Fortresses defended by combined garrisons of nobles and troops. Patience and planning ensured successful outcomes consistently. Supply chains depended on noble estates and logistics networks. Food, horses, and weapons distributed by aristocratic administration. Coordination allowed long campaigns without collapsing support lines. Organization was crucial to operational success across territories. Ceremonial drills reinforced military culture and prestige. Pageantry displayed wealth, skill, and readiness. Cavalry tournaments prepared knights for combat situations. Practice enhanced tactics and cohesion within units. Experience passed from generation to generation actively. Noble sons trained under fathers in warcraft. Tradition reinforced martial skills and honor codes. Military culture intertwined with family prestige and duty. Field marshals coordinated large multi-regiment armies. Strategic planning included positioning, timing, and coordination. Aristocratic initiative combined with central command authority. Unity of purpose maximized battlefield effectiveness consistently. Cavalry innovations adapted to firearms and changing warfare. Hussars integrated lances with pistols and sabers. Light cavalry supported reconnaissance and skirmishing operations. Adaptation preserved battlefield dominance during evolving conflicts. Military exercises strengthened both morale and identity. Noble-led armies fostered loyalty to crown and commonwealth. Shared experience created bonds between magnates and troops. Tradition maintained cohesion even in challenging campaigns. Large armies reflected commonwealth power and organization. Cavalry tradition distinguished Polish Lithuanian forces from neighbors. Training, experience, and leadership ensured battlefield superiority. Noble-led forces became defining feature of military success. Polish victories inspired pride across the Commonwealth. Heroes of battles became symbols of courage. Winged hussars and noble commanders were celebrated. Their bravery defined Poland-Lithuania's martial reputation. Military success reinforced unity among diverse populations. Christian defense against Ottomans strengthened collective identity. Shared campaigns forged bonds across ethnic and regional lines. Commonwealth citizens felt pride in national accomplishments. Triumphant armies returned to cheering towns and cities. Public ceremonies honored valor, leadership, and sacrifice. Processions, parades, and feasts reinforced communal memory. Culture immortalized military deeds through art and chronicles. Stories of battles passed from generation to generation. Songs, poems, and paintings commemorated heroic exploits. National consciousness intertwined with military glory actively. Valor became central to cultural and historical narrative. Legends of winged hussars symbolized courage and honor. Armor, lances, and wings became icons of pride. Tales emphasized skill, bravery, and discipline. Military tradition shaped Polish-Lithuanian collective imagination. Victories against powerful enemies elevated international reputation. Diplomats and rulers recognized Commonwealth as formidable force. Influence abroad reflected both strategic and cultural power. Prestige enhanced political negotiation and alliances globally. Noble-led armies fostered sense of responsibility and identity. Service in campaigns became honorable duty of aristocracy. Tradition linked social status with military contribution. Civic pride reinforced through participation in national defense. Commemoration reinforced loyalty to monarchy and state. Monuments, inscriptions, and literature celebrated military feats. Education highlighted heroic figures and campaigns consistently. Cultural memory embedded valor into national consciousness. Military victories shaped political philosophy and civic values. Courage, strategy, and honor became societal ideals. Expectations of service and leadership reflected national character. Military identity intertwined with governance and civic life. Forts, castles, and battlefields became symbols of resilience. Historical sites preserved memory of campaigns and defense. Communities honored local heroes for generations consistently. Territory itself became testimony of martial success. Shared hardships during wars united populations socially. Sieges, marches, and campaigns reinforced bonds of solidarity. Commonwealth citizens celebrated collective endurance and resilience. Military identity strengthened sense of belonging and purpose. Military triumphs inspired art, literature, and education. Chroniclers, poets, and painters immortalized battlefield glory. Schools emphasized history, courage, and strategy. National pride was inseparable from military achievement. Wars and victories defined Commonwealth's role in Europe. Poland-Lithuania became defender of borders and faith. Military prowess contributed to cultural, political, and social prestige. Glory became cornerstone of national consciousness and pride. Heroic reputation of armies fostered civic morale consistently. Success in battle symbolized strength of state and people. Identity intertwined with courage, strategy, and heritage. Military glory shaped Poland-Lithuania's enduring historical legacy. Polish kings were chosen through noble elections. Royal authority was balanced by aristocratic oversight. Monarchs could not rule without Sejm approval. Elections ensured crown remained accountable to nobility. Candidates required support from magnates and Schlochter. Dynastic heritage mattered less than political alliances. Kings negotiated policies before assuming power formally. Consent of nobles limited absolute monarchical ambition effectively. Monarchs depended on aristocracy for military campaigns. Funding, troops, and loyalty were granted selectively. Noble approval dictated success of royal initiatives. Policy required collaboration and compromise consistently. Elected monarchy prevented concentration of unchecked power. Authority rested on negotiation, persuasion, and legitimacy. King's prestige derived from skillful political maneuvering. Popular support among nobles was critical to rule. Royal decrees could be blocked or delayed strategically. Sejm oversight ensured legislation matched noble interests. Balance of power maintained stability across the Commonwealth. Monarchy was symbolic and practical within noble framework. Succession crises tested resilience of electoral system. Competing candidates created political intrigue and negotiation. Noble factions influenced decisions through alliances. Elections reflected both strategy and aristocratic ambition. Foreign influence shaped candidate selection subtly. Neighboring powers attempted to sway noble votes. Diplomacy intertwined with internal political processes carefully. Elected monarchy required vigilance and careful coalition building. Monarchs fostered support through patronage and rewards. Appointments, titles, and lands ensured loyalty consistently. Administrative control depended on magnates and council cooperation. Royal power operated within negotiated boundaries effectively. Elections reinforced aristocratic participation in governance. Nobility exercised checks on both policy and authority. Political culture valued consent, discussion, and debate actively. Monarchs had to respect traditions and institutional limits. Kings promoted unity, while respecting local autonomy. Regional authorities retained influence over law and taxation. Balance preserved peace among diverse ethnic and political groups. Elected monarchy created stable but complex governance structure. Royal authority was powerful yet constrained institutionally. Kings acted through negotiation, influence, and personal skill. Noble approval legitimized decisions and reinforced governance. Elected monarchy became distinctive feature of Commonwealth polity. Power required consensus, alliances, and political foresight. Monarchs depended on both diplomacy and noble support. Authority was collaborative rather than authoritarian consistently. Polished system balanced symbolic and functional leadership effectively. Legacy of elected monarchy shaped Commonwealth political culture. Institution highlighted aristocratic influence over central authority. Kings navigated complex systems of negotiation and consent. Elected monarchy reinforced identity, stability, and elite participation. The same became central to Commonwealth governance. Nobles debated and approved all royal initiatives. Laws required noble consent before enactment officially. Taxation depended on same authorization consistently. Parliament sessions determined funding for armies and defence. Royal requests were subject to careful scrutiny. Debates balanced crown needs with aristocratic privileges. Same ensured resources were allocated strategically. Noble representatives governed both regional and national matters. Local assemblies advised on taxes and legislation. Coordination between Sejm and provinces reinforced authority. Consensus maintained unity across diverse territories effectively. Legislation reflected compromise and negotiation actively. Multiple factions influenced decisions and policy outcomes. Minority voices could delay or block initiatives. Checks balanced monarchy with collective aristocratic power. Taxation funded military campaigns, infrastructure, and administration. Levies were negotiated according to noble influence. Wealth distribution reflected both crown and magnate interests. Economic control reinforced political stability and social order. Sejm exercised judicial oversight occasionally to enforce law. Disputes between nobles, towns, and the crown were addressed. Legal frameworks maintained peace and hierarchical order. Parliament regulated governance alongside monarchy and regional authorities. Military campaigns required approval and budget allocation. Noble deputies debated troop levies and expenditures. Funding depended on persuasion, alliances, and negotiation. Sejm controlled both strategic and practical resource deployment. Sejm sessions were long and ceremonious affairs. Procedures emphasized debate, protocol, and negotiation skill. Rituals reinforced legitimacy of aristocratic authority consistently. Political culture valued dialogue, persuasion, and shared governance. Foreign policy was influenced by parliamentary discussion. Treaties and alliances required Sejm awareness or consent. Diplomacy was shaped by noble priorities and consensus. Royal initiatives depended on support from legislative body. Sejm represented aristocratic democracy within the Commonwealth. Every noble had potential influence through representatives. Participation ensured policies reflected collective elite interests. Decision-making was collaborative and constrained royal power. Economic oversight strengthened both domestic and military security. Tax revenues funded schools, hospitals, and civic projects. Financial control empowered parliaments and limited arbitrary royal spending. Commonwealth prosperity relied on Sejm-managed fiscal policy. Internal stability was maintained through institutionalized debate. Parliament mitigated conflicts between monarch and nobility. Negotiation ensured laws aligned with diverse regional interests. Sejm became backbone of political and administrative order. The legislative system reflected aristocratic values and priorities. Noble oversight ensured accountability in taxation and governance. Lawmaking relied on negotiation, compromise, and consent. Same symbolized balance between monarchy, aristocracy, and nation. Liberum veto allowed any noble to halt legislation. Single dissent could dissolve entire parliamentary session. Unanimity ensured all voices were considered equally. Minority power often paralyzed sane decision-making entirely. Nobles used veto to protect personal or regional interests. Factions exploited procedure to block royal initiatives. Political rivalry intensified due to unchecked procedural power. Central authority weakened as reforms failed repeatedly. Sessions could be disrupted unexpectedly by objections. Delays in lawmaking frustrated governance and administration. Essential policies, taxation, and defense plans stalled frequently. Government struggled to respond to internal and external threats. Foreign powers occasionally influenced nobles to exercise veto. External interference exacerbated paralysis within political system. Diplomacy and alliances were affected by legislative gridlock. Poland-Lithuania's reputation suffered as decision-making slowed. Military campaigns were delayed by budgetary deadlocks. Funds for armies required unanimous parliamentary consent. Border defense and strategic initiatives often faltered. Liberum veto undermined Commonwealth security and preparedness. Economic policy was inconsistent and difficult to implement. Taxes, trade regulation, and infrastructure funding suffered. Noble privileges often outweighed collective national interest. Financial administration became unpredictable and fragmented consistently. Attempts at reform frequently met resistance from magnates. Strong central policies threatened aristocratic autonomy. Veto became tool of obstruction rather than constructive governance. Institution designed for freedom created systemic inefficiency. Political factions exploited veto to block opponents repeatedly. Noble rivalry paralyzed legislative process intentionally. Same sessions could collapse without any enacted law. Governance depended on persuasion and compromise extensively. Regional interests often outweighed national priorities consistently. Local concerns could disrupt central initiatives completely. Liberum veto reflected balance of freedom and dysfunction. Autonomy contributed to political fragmentation. Historically, foreign envoys manipulated nobles to protect their agendas. Legislation favorable to Commonwealth interests could be blocked. Centralized administration struggled to enforce policy effectively. National coordination became nearly impossible at times. Judicial and military reforms suffered under legislative paralysis. Needed improvements were delayed for decades repeatedly. Progress was obstructed by minority privilege and noble self-interest. Liberum veto weakened institutional authority profoundly. Even minor disagreements could trigger full parliamentary collapse. Legislative efficiency declined as unanimity became impossible. State projects were abandoned or indefinitely postponed. Crown authority eroded over prolonged periods consistently. Internal stability depended on negotiation and magnate goodwill. Consensus building became crucial for even routine governance. Liberum veto symbolized both aristocratic liberty and systemic weakness. Institution illustrated tension between freedom and functionality. By the 17th century, veto contributed to Commonwealth decline. Central governance became incapable of decisive action efficiently. Political culture valued freedom, undermined state coherence. Liberum veto became emblem of Polish-Lithuanian structural vulnerability. Political authority rested primarily in aristocratic hands. Magnates and Schlochter controlled legislation, taxation, and appointments. Monarch depended on their consent for governance. Noble influence dominated both regional and national affairs. Same sessions reflected collective elite priorities consistently. Debates prioritized aristocratic privileges over common needs. Major decisions required approval of powerful magnates. Elite networks determined policy, alliances, and appointments effectively. Large estates reinforced social and economic dominance. Land ownership translated directly into political leverage. Nobles commanded private armies for security and influence. Wealth enabled patronage of culture, education, and politics. Local administration was often under noble control. Regional courts, tax collection, and policing were aristocratic domains. Magnates mediated disputes, ensuring loyalty and compliance. Autonomy strengthened elite authority across the Commonwealth. Military power reflected noble organization and leadership. Cavalry and infantry units often raised by aristocratic households. Campaigns relied on noble coordination and contribution. Field experience reinforced authority and prestige of magnates. Magnates influenced royal elections and policy direction. Support or opposition could make or break kings. Political factions centered around powerful families. Elite consensus determined stability of monarchy and state. Cultural and intellectual life depended on noble patronage. Art, architecture, and universities thrived under aristocratic support. Nobles shaped education, religion, and civic institutions. Influence extended beyond politics into social and cultural realms. Economic control reinforced political authority consistently. Wealth funded estates, military, and public projects. Grain exports and trade benefited magnates disproportionately. Economic dominance strengthened political leverage and regional control. Power was often hereditary among leading families. Dynastic wealth and alliances maintained elite supremacy. Generations preserved influence through marriages and networks. Political authority was intertwined with lineage and legacy. Centralized administration was limited by aristocratic autonomy. Kings negotiated with magnates to implement policies. Royal decrees required noble cooperation to succeed. Governance reflected balance between crown and elite power. Elite councils shaped legislation, appointments, and military command. Magnates coordinated policy across Sejm and local assemblies. Consensus ensured compliance and stability while limiting centralization. Noble networks acted as both power and governance mechanism. Peasants and towns had limited influence on policy. Social hierarchy reinforced concentration of authority. Noble privilege ensured disproportionate political, economic, and military power. Commonwealth politics centered on aristocratic consensus rather than mass participation. The concentration of power among elites defined governance. Aristocracy controlled state, law, and national resources. Authority was collaborative, negotiated, and factionally influenced. Elite dominance created both stability and long-term systemic weaknesses. Noble privileges provided extraordinary political freedoms. Freedom of speech and veto protected aristocratic interests. Liberum veto exemplified extreme individual liberty. Checks on monarchy ensured no absolute authority existed. Excessive freedom often obstructed effective governance. Minor disagreements could halt essential legislation quickly. Reforms and centralization were consistently blocked. Decision-making required unanimous consent from diverse nobles. Foreign powers exploited freedoms to influence politics. Envoys bribed or persuaded nobles to exercise veto. External interference exacerbated paralysis in Sejm sessions. Commonwealth policies were weakened by divided aristocracy. Military preparedness suffered under unrestricted noble authority. Funding for armies depended on voluntary cooperation. Strategic initiatives delayed due to factional disputes. Defense was constrained by political individualism repeatedly. Economic policy became inconsistent and inefficient repeatedly. Trade, taxation, and infrastructure relied on noble approval. Commercial growth was hampered by factional obstruction. Freedoms intended for balance weakened economic management. Reform attempts faced resistance from conservative elites. Magnates protected privileges over national interest consistently. Progress in governance, military, and justice stalled. Political innovation was sacrificed for preservation of liberty. Internal stability suffered from competing noble agendas. Conflicts among factions created gridlock and indecision. Minority rights prevented majority-driven initiatives effectively. Long-term consequences undermined central authority gradually. Political freedoms limited royal power significantly. Kings could not enforce policy without cooperation. Elected monarchy and liberum veto reinforced aristocratic dominance. Authority was diffused, weakening decision-making efficiency. Foreign alliances required consensus for strategic action. Delays hindered timely responses to European conflicts. Adversaries exploited internal divisions to their advantage. Commonwealth's influence declined due to political fragmentation. Judicial and administrative reforms were blocked repeatedly. Legal consistency was difficult to achieve under veto. Regional autonomy reinforced noble independence. Central government lacked enforcement mechanisms across territories. Cultural and educational initiatives depended on aristocratic support. Projects could be delayed or abandoned due to disagreement. Funding and patronage required political negotiation constantly. Institutional innovation suffered from excessive freedoms. Over time, political liberties became structural vulnerabilities. Unrestricted noble power created inefficiencies and corruption. Central governance weakened as aristocracy prioritized self-interest. Freedoms intended for protection became systemic obstacles. Military, economic, and diplomatic action was constrained. Deliberation often replaced decisive leadership in crises. Political freedoms undermined coherence, strategy, and long-term planning. Commonwealth stability relied on fragile consensus rather than authority. Legacy of excessive liberty shaped future decline. While promoting equality among nobles, it paralyzed government. Freedoms preserved elite influence, but limited state capacity. Political structure became vulnerable to internal and external threats. Commonwealth demonstrated tension between liberty and effectiveness. Political freedoms ensured aristocratic dominance, yet hindered unity. Long-term consequences included diminished power and territorial loss. System illustrates balance between rights and state functionality historically. The Commonwealth encompassed diverse ethnic groups. Poles, Lithuanians, Jews, and Ukrainians coexisted. Each community maintained language, customs, and traditions. Cultural diversity defined social and political life. Cities reflected mixture of populations visibly. Markets, neighborhoods, and guilds showcased variety. Trade and daily life intertwined ethnic communities. Interaction fostered exchange of ideas and practices. Jewish communities contributed economically and culturally. Merchants, scholars, and artisans thrived in towns. Synagogues, schools, and charitable institutions flourished. Integration strengthened urban and regional development consistently. Lithuanian and Ruthenian populations preserved local governance. Noble traditions and local assemblies reinforced identity. Regional elites maintained influence alongside Polish aristocracy. Autonomy allowed coexistence while supporting central authority. Migration and settlement enriched social fabric regularly. Borders attracted settlers seeking economic opportunity. Communities adapted while preserving heritage and customs. Population diversity enhanced Commonwealth's resilience and adaptability. Commonwealth governance accommodated multiple languages officially. Legal documents reflected linguistic and cultural plurality. Courts, administration, and education embraced diversity. Policy promoted coexistence across a vast territory. Ethnic groups collaborated in commerce and diplomacy actively. Trade networks required cooperation across cultural lines. Shared economic interests bridged political and social differences. Multiculturalism became practical and strategic advantage. Social hierarchy influenced intergroup interaction carefully. Nobles, townspeople, and peasants maintained distinct roles. Cultural diversity existed within structured social framework. Status and tradition guided intercommunity relationships consistently. Religious diversity often aligned with ethnic identity clearly. Catholics, Orthodox, Protestants, and Jews coexisted. Tolerance was pragmatic and codified in laws. Communities preserved faith while contributing to society. Festivals, ceremonies, and public life reflected pluralism. Music, art, and theatre included multiple traditions. Cultural expression intertwined with religious and ethnic identity. Celebrations strengthened bonds across communities and regions. Education and scholarship grew on multicultural influences. Universities and academies accepted students from various backgrounds. Intellectual exchange flourished across linguistic and cultural borders. Knowledge became shared property of diverse population consistently. Migration patterns shaped towns, villages, and the states. Settlement encouraged economic, social, and cultural growth. Population diversity influenced architecture, cuisine, and customs. Communities adapted while respecting local and regional practices. Military service included diverse ethnic and religious contingents. Units reflected regional composition of the Commonwealth. Integration strengthened army cohesion and operational effectiveness. Diversity became a strategic and practical asset consistently. Multiculturalism was a hallmark of Polish-Lithuanian identity. Interaction of communities reinforced shared political and social life. Tolerance and coexistence ensured internal stability. Commonwealth society thrived on diversity and cooperation effectively. Trade, scholarship, and culture benefited from ethnic variety. Multicultural population shaped art, literature, and intellectual life. Integration enriched political, economic, and social development. Diversity became cornerstone of Golden Age prosperity and influence. Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth promoted remarkable religious tolerance. Catholics, Orthodox, Protestants, and Jews coexisted peacefully. Faith shaped identity but did not spark major conflict. Legal protections ensured freedom of worship effectively. The Warsaw Confederation formalized religious coexistence firmly. Nobles guaranteed rights to all recognized faiths. Tolerance preserved social stability across diverse regions. Religious plurality became a defining feature of governance. Churches, synagogues, and chapels flourished across towns. Communities practiced rituals according to tradition freely. Religious festivals enriched civic and cultural life. Architecture reflected diverse spiritual and artistic influences. Clergy influenced both moral and political matters. Catholic, Orthodox, and Protestant leaders participated actively. Synagogues served as educational and communal centers. Faith communities contributed to social cohesion consistently. Religious dialogue fostered intellectual and cultural exchange. Schools and universities welcomed students of various faiths. Scholarship benefited from cross-denominational collaboration. Ideas traveled across religious and geographic boundaries effectively. Warsaw Confederation ensured protection from persecution legally. Minority faiths enjoyed rights uncommon in Europe at the time. Legal framework prevented arbitrary interference by authorities. Tolerance reinforced loyalty to Commonwealth and its institutions. Religious diversity influenced politics and diplomacy significantly. Noble factions balanced confessional interests in Sejm. Foreign relations considered internal religious composition carefully. Policy aimed to prevent sectarian conflict while preserving unity. Art and literature reflected spiritual plurality consistently. Paintings, architecture, and music incorporated multiple traditions. Cultural life thrived through interaction of different faiths. Religious coexistence enriched intellectual and artistic development. Urban centers demonstrated coexistence practically and visibly. Marketplaces, schools, and civic spaces brought communities together. Neighbors shared trade, festivals, and social networks collaboratively. Integration promoted mutual respect and cultural exchange effectively. Confessional diversity influenced education and legal practice actively. Universities adapted curricula to accommodate different beliefs. Scholarly debate included multiple theological and philosophical perspectives. Learning reflected coexistence and intellectual openness consistently. Religious minorities contributed economically and socially actively. Jews engaged in trade, crafts, and finance extensively. Protestant communities promoted literacy and schooling effectively. Orthodox traditions preserved local identity and continuity. Tolerance mitigated potential conflicts in frontier regions effectively. Borderlands hosted mixed populations with overlapping jurisdictions. Policies prevented escalation of sectarian tensions repeatedly. Coexistence strengthened political stability and societal resilience. Religious freedom became a cultural and political hallmark. Polish-Lithuanian example contrasted sharply with other European states. Pragmatism and law ensured protection of minority faiths. Tolerance reinforced Commonwealth identity and long-term cohesion. Shared governance and law maintained confessional balance actively. Nobles, clergy, and towns negotiated religious practices carefully. Autonomy within legal framework prevented major disputes consistently. Faith communities thrived while respecting overarching political authority. Religious coexistence strengthened Commonwealth's international reputation. Diplomacy highlighted tolerance and pragmatic governance effectively. Peace among faiths contributed to economic and cultural prosperity. Tolerance became integral to Golden Age society and identity. The Schlochter shaped both social and political life. Nobles controlled land, law, and administrative authority. Aristocratic values influenced governance and societal norms. Polish-Lithuanian identity intertwined with noble traditions deeply. Nobles held exclusive rights to participate in Sejm. Political debate, voting, and legislation reflected their influence. Elected monarchy depended on aristocratic support consistently. Decision-making power rested primarily with elite families. Education reinforced noble culture and civic responsibility. Sons trained in rhetoric, military arts, and governance. Universities and private tutors prepared aristocrats for leadership. Learning emphasized strategy, law, and ethical conduct equally. Courtly life displayed wealth, taste, and refinement visibly. Palaces hosted banquets, ceremonies, and cultural events. Art, music, and literature reflected noble patronage actively. Cultural leadership reinforced aristocratic status and identity. Military service was central to noble prestige regularly. Cavalry traditions reinforced honor, courage, and societal expectation. Participation in campaigns demonstrated loyalty and competence publicly. Heroism became a key component of noble identity. Noble estates influenced local governance and social order. Magistrates, courts, and law enforcement were aristocratic domains. Peasants worked lands under noble supervision and authority. Regional power reflected wealth, lineage, and military capability. Religious patronage reflected both piety and social standing. Churches and schools were funded by noble families. Faith and culture intertwined to enhance societal influence. Clergy often allied with aristocracy to reinforce hierarchy. Political assemblies showcased elite debate and rhetorical skill. Magnates guided policies and coalitions across same sessions. Factional negotiations shaped governance and legislation effectively. Consensus building reinforced cohesion while maintaining noble prerogatives. Cultural production emphasized refinement, intellect, and taste. Literature, music, and visual arts reflected aristocratic ideals. Patronage ensured creative expression aligned with noble values. Commonwealth's artistic identity was shaped largely by elite influence. Urban and rural society adapted to noble priorities. Towns respected aristocratic rights and governance structures. Peasant communities followed customary law under noble oversight. Social hierarchy reinforced status and political control consistently. Nobility maintained networks through marriage and alliances. Families consolidated power across regions strategically. Lineage and prestige dictated influence in political and cultural life. Elite cohesion strengthened Commonwealth stability and identity. Festivals, tournaments, and ceremonies reinforced collective noble identity. Public display of wealth and skill projected status widely. Pageantry combined cultural, social, and political elements deliberately. Noble lifestyle shaped public perception and national consciousness. Noble culture dictated standards of honor and civic virtue. Values emphasized loyalty, bravery, and intellectual accomplishment. Education, military, and social conduct reflected these ideals consistently. Schlöchter defined the character and ethos of society. Political, military, and cultural life revolved around aristocratic norms. Elite families controlled both policy and prestige actively. Noble dominance structured governance, society, and identity permanently. Commonwealth culture was inseparable from aristocratic leadership and tradition. Polish Lithuanian Golden Age celebrated arts and intellect. Literature thrived with poetry, drama, and chronicles. Writers explored politics, history, and human nature. Creative expression reflected both national pride and sophistication. Architecture blended Gothic, Renaissance, and Baroque styles. Palaces, churches, and public buildings displayed grandeur. Urban centers reflected wealth, power, and artistic vision. Construction projects symbolized prestige of monarchy and nobility. Universities and academies promoted philosophical inquiry widely. Scholars debated ethics, law, and metaphysical questions. Humanist ideas influenced both education and public discourse. Intellectual curiosity defined the Commonwealth's cultural landscape. Printing presses expanded distribution of knowledge rapidly. Books, pamphlets, and treatises reached distant regions. Literature spread ideas of governance, morality, and science. Education and culture became more accessible to broader audiences. Poets celebrated heroic deeds and national history proudly. Historical chronicles preserved memory of battles and leaders. Drama entertained while imparting moral and political lessons. Artistic works reflected societal ideals and noble values consistently. Music flourished in courts, churches, and civic spaces. Composers created sacred and secular works simultaneously. Performance enhanced cultural life and community identity. Harmony of arts reflected intellectual and spiritual refinement. Philosophy addressed governance, ethics, and natural science. Scholars engaged in correspondence with European intellectuals. Ideas flowed across borders, enriching local thought actively. Commonwealth thinkers contributed to European Renaissance discourse. Noble patronage funded creative and scholarly endeavors. Support enabled artists, architects, and philosophers to thrive. Commissions reflected both personal prestige and civic pride. Cultural investment reinforced status and influence across society. Libraries preserved classical, contemporary, and local works. Manuscripts and printed books were valued cultural assets. Knowledge was curated, copied, and disseminated systematically. Education and scholarship became central to societal progress. Public buildings embodied civic pride and aesthetic achievement. Town halls, universities, and churches symbolized prosperity. Decorative elements reflected philosophical and artistic trends. Urban design merged functionality with cultural expression. Art and literature promoted national identity consciously. Themes included heroism, morality, and shared history. Creative works reinforced social cohesion and cultural memory. Expression shaped public perception of the Commonwealth internationally. Philosophical debate influenced governance and law actively. Ethical theories guided noble conduct and civic responsibility. Reasoned discourse became integral to political culture consistently. Intellectual life shaped both thought and policy significantly. Festivals, pageantry, and ceremonies combined multiple arts. Drama, music, and poetry enhanced public celebrations. Cultural events reinforced hierarchy, identity, and community pride. Arts became a tool of political and social cohesion. Education and intellectual life were interconnected with culture. Universities produced thinkers, poets, and statesmen effectively. Philosophy and literature informed civic responsibility and discourse. Commonwealth culture was intellectually vibrant and socially integrated. Golden Age left lasting legacy in European arts. Architecture, literature, and philosophy reflected innovation and identity. Creative and scholarly achievements defined Poland-Lithuania internationally. Cultural flourishing reinforced prestige, knowledge, and national pride. Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth valued freedom highly. Nobles exercised political rights and civic participation. Individual liberties shaped governance, culture, and society. Tradition of consent defined national political identity. Liberum veto symbolized noble freedom and privilege. Decision-making required unanimous agreement in Sejm. Checks on monarchy reflected commitment to liberty. Political system emphasized shared power and responsibility. Religious tolerance reinforced cultural and personal freedom. Catholics, Protestants, Orthodox, and Jews coexisted peacefully. Faith communities practiced openly under legal protections. Tolerance became a defining feature of Commonwealth society. Education encouraged independent thought and intellectual growth. Universities promoted debate, philosophy, and civic responsibility. Critical thinking and scholarship were highly valued. Intellectual life strengthened identity and societal cohesion. Nobility celebrated civic duty and political engagement actively. Participation in Sejm, assemblies, and councils reinforced citizenship. Traditions of debate, negotiation, and deliberation endured. Political culture valued discussion over autocratic rule consistently. Military service reflected both duty and honor proudly. Cavalry and noble-led armies reinforced collective responsibility. Defense of borders linked personal valor to national identity. Freedom was defended through bravery and shared commitment. Local governance empowered regional assemblies and magnates. Autonomy encouraged participation and accountability among elites. Peasants and townspeople influenced local customs indirectly. Decentralization reflected commitment to liberty within structured hierarchy. Legal frameworks protected property, contract, and civic rights. Law balanced authority of crown with noble privileges. Institutions emphasized consensus, fairness, and accountability consistently. Rule of law strengthened societal identity and cohesion. Cultural expression reinforced national pride and liberty. Art, literature, and architecture reflected civic values. Festivals, pageantry, and rituals celebrated communal identity. Tradition intertwined social, political, and artistic life. Historical memory celebrated heroes, victories, and civic achievements. Legends of winged hussars and noble statesmanship inspired citizens. Collective remembrance reinforced identity and moral values. Military and political glory became symbolic of liberty. Urban and rural communities embraced participatory governance. Towns practiced local self-rule under overarching noble authority. Freedom of commerce, speech, and civic engagement flourished. Autonomy fostered resilience, cooperation, and civic pride. National symbols, flags, and emblems expressed collective identity. Visual and ceremonial representation strengthened political consciousness. Ceremonies and rituals reinforced memory of shared values. Tradition promoted unity while respecting diverse cultural heritage. Philosophy and education promoted civic responsibility and reason. Ethical conduct, debate, and governance reflected core ideals. Schools and universities taught balance of freedom and duty. Intellectual life underpinned national identity and political culture. Long-standing freedoms shaped expectations of governance consistently. Citizens valued participation, debate, and personal rights equally. Traditions of liberty influenced law, culture, and diplomacy. Commonwealth identity intertwined with both rights and responsibility. Military, political, and cultural traditions reinforced collective identity. Shared experiences created pride, cohesion, and loyalty across society. Liberty was both practical and symbolic for citizens. Traditions endured through generations, shaping national character permanently. Golden Age legacy included freedom, civic engagement, and identity. Polish Lithuanian culture balanced individual liberty with societal cohesion. Historical memories celebrated participatory governance and noble responsibility. Tradition of liberty became a defining feature of Commonwealth society. By the 17th century, Commonwealth governance weakened. Liberum veto frequently blocked essential legislation effectively. Noble factions pursued personal advantage over national interest. Internal disputes paralyzed decision-making and delayed reforms consistently. Magnates formed competing political alliances across Sejm. Factionalism intensified, undermining central authority repeatedly. Debates often ended without meaningful resolution or compromise. Governance became fragmented and inefficient over time. Royal initiatives faced constant obstruction from aristocracy. Monarchs struggled to implement military or fiscal reforms. Noble autonomy limited effectiveness of central administration significantly. Policy depended on negotiation rather than decisive authority. Rivalries among elite families fueled prolonged political stalemates. Personal ambition overshadowed collective Commonwealth priorities consistently. Sejm sessions collapsed under factional disputes regularly. Parliamentary procedures were manipulated for self-interest and leverage. Foreign powers exploited internal divisions skillfully. Russia, Prussia, and Austria influenced magnates for advantage. Political fragmentation created opportunities for external interference. Commonwealth vulnerability increased due to aristocratic conflicts. Civil unrest emerged from unresolved disputes and regional tensions. Peasants, towns, and smaller nobles were caught in conflicts. Local rebellions further strained weakened governance structures. Internal cohesion deteriorated under persistent elite rivalries. Legislation on taxation, defense, and trade stalled repeatedly. Budgets for armies and fortifications were delayed frequently. Economic and military planning suffered from political paralysis. National security and prosperity declined as a result consistently. Judicial and administrative reforms were blocked intentionally. Noble privilege outweighed broader public and national interest. Legal uniformity eroded as local magnates retained autonomy. Central authority struggled to enforce coherent policies consistently. Sejm factionalism prevented coordinated foreign policy effectively. Diplomatic decisions were delayed or undermined by internal disputes. Alliances were weakened, treaties postponed, and negotiations compromised. Commonwealth influence declined as internal conflict persisted steadily. Military readiness suffered under delayed funding and planning. Troop levies depended on magnate cooperation and consent. Border defense was inconsistent and poorly coordinated repeatedly. Internal discord undermined strategic planning and preparedness. Economic decline accompanied political dysfunction gradually. Trade, taxation, and agricultural productivity were disrupted. Infrastructure projects were delayed or abandoned due to disagreement. Financial weakness compounded governance and defense failures consistently. Elite disputes eroded public confidence in Commonwealth institutions. Common citizens witnessed indecision and corruption undermining state stability. Factionalism overshadowed national interest and civic responsibility. Political culture emphasized freedom but hindered effective governance. Foreign diplomacy suffered as magnates prioritized personal agendas. Neighboring empires exploited deadlock to expand influence. Commonwealth policy became reactive rather than proactive consistently. Internal conflicts accelerated gradual decline and vulnerability. Noble conflicts created instability across provinces consistently. Local governance mirrored factional disputes at national level. Magnates controlled military, judiciary, and administration locally. Fragmentation undermined unity and collective Commonwealth identity. By late 18th century, paralysis was systemic and entrenched. Reforms were impossible under unchecked aristocratic power. Internal divisions made Commonwealth incapable of decisive action. Political culture of liberty became structural weakness historically. Internal political paralysis directly set stage for downfall. Factionalism, veto abuse, and noble rivalries weakened state. Commonwealth authority eroded, leaving it exposed to external threats. Decline of governance marked the beginning of partition era. Polish-Lithuanian borders faced constant foreign aggression. Russia, Prussia, and Austria invaded repeatedly over decades. Commonwealth armies struggled against coordinated, external military forces. Territorial integrity was challenged on multiple fronts simultaneously. Russian armies exploited political paralysis effectively. They seized eastern territories with minimal resistance. Prussian forces advanced from the west relentlessly. Austria pressed claims in the south consistently. Military campaigns drained resources and morale across the Commonwealth. Defensive efforts were hampered by internal divisions. Magnates hesitated or refused to support royal initiatives. Coordination among noble-led armies was inconsistent and delayed. Sieges devastated towns, villages, and infrastructure repeatedly. Fortifications fell under sustained pressure from foreign troops. Civilians endured hardship, displacement, and economic disruption. Local resistance was often heroic, but insufficient to repel invaders. Commonwealth relied heavily on cavalry traditions. Winged hussars fought bravely despite numerical disadvantage. Tactical skill delayed some enemy advances temporarily. Valor could not overcome political and logistical weaknesses consistently. Foreign powers exploited noble rivalries strategically. Magnates sometimes sided with invaders for personal gain. Internal disunity magnified vulnerability to invasion. Enemies advanced with minimal opposition in key regions. Repeated incursions weakened royal authority dramatically. Kings depended on unreliable support from magnates. Military defeats eroded confidence in monarchy and institutions. Centralized command was nearly impossible under factional pressure. Armies were poorly funded and inadequately equipped. Logistics failed to meet sustained campaign requirements. Supply shortages undermined morale and operational effectiveness. Defensive strategies were compromised by administrative dysfunction. Key cities fell after prolonged sieges or strategic retreats. Wars disrupted trade, agriculture, and civic administration. Economic collapse accompanied territorial losses repeatedly. Populations suffered from violence, famine, and displacement consistently. Commonwealth alliances were unreliable in repelling invasions. Neighboring powers intervened opportunistically to seize land. Diplomatic solutions failed due to noble indecision. Partitions became increasingly likely as military vulnerability grew. Military glory of the past could not prevent decline. Winged hussars and noble-led forces were insufficient. Heroism could not compensate for structural political weaknesses. Battles ended in retreat, loss, and territorial concessions. Repeated invasions reshaped demographic and cultural landscapes. Villages burned, towns occupied, and families displaced. Social fabric weakened under sustained foreign pressure. Recovery was slow and hindered by political paralysis. Strategic borders shifted under foreign occupation. Eastern, Western, and Southern territories were gradually annexed. Commonwealth influence in Europe diminished substantially. Military defeats paved way for eventual partition agreements. By late 18th century, invasion had become routine. Foreign armies controlled key fortresses and cities consistently. Commonwealth could not respond decisively due to internal weakness. External pressure accelerated the state's ultimate disintegration. Legacy of invasions highlighted both courage and vulnerability. Polish-Lithuanian forces fought valiantly, but were outmatched. Military skill clashed with political failure repeatedly. Foreign conquest exposed systemic weaknesses of the Commonwealth. By the 18th century, Commonwealth economy faltered. Trade routes were disrupted by wars and invasions. Agricultural production declined under feudal inefficiency consistently. Revenue from taxes became unreliable and insufficient. Noble privileges limited central collection of funds. Same delays blocked financial reforms repeatedly. Monarchs could not raise sufficient funds for armies. Military readiness suffered due to chronic economic weakness. Infrastructure deteriorated from neglect and conflict damage. Roads, bridges, and fortifications fell into disrepair. Supply chains struggled to support defense and trade. Economic stagnation undermined both urban and rural growth. Manufacturing and commerce declined under political uncertainty. Guilds faced instability from disrupted markets. Foreign competition exploited Commonwealth economic weakness effectively. Investment and innovation were minimal due to aristocratic obstruction. Military expenditures drained scarce resources repeatedly. Armies were underfunded, poorly equipped, and undersupplied. Cavalry and infantry units could not maintain readiness consistently. Defensive fortresses lacked modern artillery and repair funding. Populations suffered from famine, disease, and poverty. Economic instability reduced food security and civic services. Migration increased as people sought opportunities abroad. Demographic pressures further strained weakened local economies. Noble estates operated semi-autonomously, limiting central revenue. Magnates avoided taxation or redirected income for personal use. Financial imbalance reinforced inequality and hindered state projects. Commonwealth relied on voluntary contributions from elite families. Trade networks became unreliable due to border instability. Exports of grain, timber, and goods were disrupted. Ports, markets, and merchants faced insecurity from conflict. Economic stagnation reinforced dependency on agrarian output exclusively. Public works and civic projects were abandoned or delayed. Urban development slowed as funding dried up consistently. Town defenses and civic infrastructure deteriorated over decades. Society became less resilient to external or internal pressures. Loans from foreign powers increased dependency and vulnerability. Credit was expensive and tied to political concessions. Debt obligations constrained fiscal flexibility further. Economic weakness amplified political and military fragility. Nobles resisted reforms that threatened their economic privileges. Central authority lacked leverage to enforce taxation. Financial mismanagement undermined army, administration, and justice. Systemic inefficiency eroded state capacity gradually. Weakened economy hindered response to invasion effectively. Armies lacked resources for sustained campaigns or fortification repairs. Defense depended on temporary levies and noble contingents. Long-term security was impossible without centralized funding consistently. Economic decline fueled social unrest and dissatisfaction. Peasants, townspeople, and artisans suffered from neglect. reduced trade and income limited opportunity and mobility. Society became increasingly vulnerable to exploitation and occupation. By the late 18th century, Commonwealth economy was fragile. Weakened finances compounded military, political, and social decline. Economic fragility left state exposed to partitioning neighbors. Declining resources accelerated the fall of the Polish Empire. By 1772, neighboring powers eyed Commonwealth territory. Russia, Prussia, and Austria agreed on partitions secretly. First partitions seized borderlands and wealth systematically. Poland-Lithuania lost valuable lands without meaningful resistance. Sejm was unable to oppose foreign encroachment effectively. Internal paralysis prevented coordinated defense or diplomatic solution. Magnates were divided, some cooperating with invaders. Political weakness accelerated the Commonwealth's territorial erosion rapidly. Second partition in 1793 further reduced Polish sovereignty. Prussia and Russia annexed central and eastern regions. National government retained only minimal authority and control. Autonomy of the state became nearly meaningless entirely. Patriotic resistance arose, but was limited in scale. Kościuszko uprising in 1794 sought to restore independence. Heroic efforts were valiant, but ultimately unsuccessful. Military defeats and internal disunity allowed foreign domination. Austria claimed southern territories strategically and economically. Partitioning powers divided resources, towns, and farmland deliberately. Polish population was subjected to foreign administration and law. Communities faced new rulers and imposed regulations consistently. Sejm was dissolved and Polish governance effectively abolished. Foreign powers imposed control over legislation and taxation. National institutions were suppressed systematically by partitioning states. Loss of sovereignty was total and irreversible at this stage. Borders were redrawn, erasing Poland from European maps. Cities, villages, and countryside were absorbed by neighbors. Cultural and political identity persisted, but lacked formal recognition. Territorial existence of the Polish Empire officially ended. Population faced uncertainty under new administrations consistently. Migration, assimilation, and repression affected social structure. Traditional elites lost power, while new authorities enforced compliance. Local governance was replaced with foreign bureaucratic systems. Economic resources were divided to benefit occupying powers. Agricultural production, trade networks, and taxation were appropriated. Commonwealth wealth contributed to strengthening Russia, Prussia, and Austria. Polish citizens became subjects of foreign empires forcibly. Third partition in 1795 completed the Commonwealth's destruction. Remaining territories were absorbed without negotiation or compensation. National sovereignty disappeared after centuries of regional influence. Poland ceased to exist as an independent state entirely. Patriotic memory and culture endured despite territorial erasure. Legends, literature, and clandestine societies preserved national identity. Resistance and cultural preservation became central to Polish consciousness. Hope for a future restoration remained alive among citizens consistently. Diplomatic efforts to restore Poland failed repeatedly during this period. European powers recognized partition arrangements formally and legally. Neighboring states consolidated authority over annexed lands decisively. Commonwealth elites were powerless to reverse foreign control. Partitions demonstrated both internal weakness and external opportunism. Political paralysis, factionalism, and noble privilege facilitated conquest. Foreign militaries exploited strategic and administrative vulnerabilities effectively. Loss of independence marked the tragic end of Polish Empire. Partitioned territories were absorbed culturally, economically, and militarily. Integration into foreign states reshaped social and political life. Despite occupation, Polish language, culture, and identity survived. National consciousness persisted, inspiring later movements for restoration. Legacy of the three partitions shaped modern Polish history. Erasure highlighted consequences of political dysfunction and foreign ambition. Polish memory of sovereignty fueled 19th-century uprisings and reform efforts. Partitions marked the definitive collapse of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. By 1795, Poland ceased to exist politically. Foreign powers controlled all former Commonwealth territories. Sovereignty was entirely stripped from the nation permanently. Monarchy, Sejm, and institutions were abolished completely. Citizens became subjects of Russia, Prussia, and Austria. National governance was replaced with foreign administrative systems. Local autonomy vanished under strict imperial oversight consistently. Legal and political structures were subordinated to occupiers. Military forces were disbanded or absorbed by invaders. Polish armies could no longer defend territory independently. Fortresses, garrisons, and borders were controlled externally. National defense was under foreign authority entirely. Cultural identity persisted despite political annihilation. Language, literature, and tradition became tools of resistance. Secret societies and underground networks preserved national consciousness. Intellectual and artistic expression reinforced hope for a restoration. Economic resources were exploited by occupying powers systematically. Agriculture, industry, and trade were redirected for a foreign benefit. Merchants, peasants, and nobles faced new economic realities. Commonwealth prosperity was absorbed by partitioning empires entirely. Patriotic uprisings, though heroic, failed to restore independence. Kościuszko uprising and local rebellions were suppressed brutally. National spirit remained resilient despite military and political defeat. Symbolic resistance preserved memory of Polish sovereignty consistently. Diplomacy offered no relief against partition agreements enforced. Neighboring states ignored appeals for negotiation or compromise. European powers recognized new borders officially and formally. Poland's voice was excluded from international decision-making entirely. Noble estates and magnate power were curtailed by occupation. Former elites adapted to foreign authority or faced exile. Land ownership was redefined under new administrative regimes. Political influence of aristocracy vanished with Commonwealth institutions. The Catholic Church and other religious organizations maintained spiritual leadership. Faith communities became centers of cultural preservation quietly. Religious life offered continuity amid political suppression. Communities relied on tradition to reinforce national identity. Education and intellectual life continued in clandestine and local forms. Universities and schools operated under restricted conditions. Scholarship and literature preserved historical memory and values. Knowledge became a means of sustaining collective identity. Polish identity shifted from political to cultural and symbolic. National consciousness endured through language, religion, and tradition. Historical memory reinforced unity despite absence of sovereignty. Cultural resilience prepared future generations for eventual restoration. Partitions and occupation reshaped demographic, social, and political landscapes. Population adapted to foreign rule while preserving internal cohesion. Cities, towns, and rural communities maintained local customs secretly. Social structures adjusted, but identity remained rooted in heritage. Exile and diaspora carried Polish identity abroad actively. Political refugees and intellectuals maintained culture and networks internationally. European awareness of Poland's plight influenced diplomacy intermittently. Hope for national revival persisted in foreign courts and societies. By 1795, the Polish Empire existed only in memory. Sovereignty, governance, and international recognition were permanently lost. Legacy endured in culture, literature, and patriotic consciousness. National spirit persisted, foreshadowing eventual movements for independence. Historical record remembers Poland as a resilient nation. Despite partitions, identity, tradition, and culture survived decades. The Commonwealth's fall illustrated consequences of internal weakness. Yet Polish society preserved hope, unity, and enduring legacy. Poland lost its independence, but survived culturally. National identity endured, despite absence of sovereignty consistently. Language, traditions, and faith preserved collective memory effectively. Communities maintained heritage, while foreign powers controlled territory. Legacy of liberty shaped Polish social and political thought. Tolerance for diverse religions remained a defining characteristic. Resilience grew as citizens adapted under foreign rule. Civil society and clandestine networks reinforced cultural survival. Ideas of freedom inspired generations during occupation and exile. Patriotic education and literature maintained historical memory actively. National symbols and rituals strengthened cohesion and identity. Polish society cultivated hope despite political suppression steadily. Influence on modern nationalism was profound and enduring. Movements for independence drew on historical traditions of liberty. Revolutions, uprisings, and reforms echoed Golden Age ideals. Memory of sovereignty shaped collective aspirations for self-rule. Lessons emerged about power, unity, and governance balance. Excessive noble freedom had weakened centralized authority historically. Political paralysis allowed external forces to exploit vulnerabilities. Commonwealth history taught enduring importance of compromise and consensus. Despite partitions, cultural and intellectual achievements persisted remarkably. Literature, philosophy, and art kept national consciousness alive. Educated elites nurtured patriotism and historical awareness quietly. Diaspora and exiled leaders preserved identity abroad effectively. A forgotten empire survived in spirit and memory. Centuries of oppression could not erase Polish resilience fully. Communities maintained identity, culture, and hope consistently. Legacy of the Polish Empire informed modern nationhood profoundly. National pride persisted beyond maps, armies, and political control. Poland's story is one of endurance, courage, and identity. The Commonwealth lived on through people, tradition, and culture. Even without a state, the empire's spirit never vanished. Freedom, tolerance, and resilience became lasting hallmarks. Historical memory continued to inspire unity and restoration efforts. The Polish Empire's story reflects triumph of spirit over adversity. Legacy remains embedded in the culture and heart of Poland.